adventures, starting with American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 Jim, a Noble. According to the fairy tale, after leaving the palace, Jim uses his ability to understand animal language to help a goldfish, the Ant King, and 3 crows. He then arrives in a kingdom where the princess is seeking a husband. However, to marry the princess, he must fulfill one of her demands. Failure to do so will result in death. Several individuals have already been executed, but Jim, captivated by the princess's beauty, chooses to take on the challenge. The first demand is to retrieve a ring that had been thrown into the sea. After Jim completes the first request with the help of the goldfish, the princess changes her mind and demands another task. She will scatter 10 bags of rice in the park, requiring him to retrieve them all overnight. Desperate to win the princess's hand, Jim agrees. Fortunately, with the help of the Ant King, he once again completes this seemingly impossible task. However, the princess still refuses to marry Jim, instead demanding he find the golden apple. Jim runs out to search for it, and encounters 3 crows. Learning of his story, they find the golden apple for Jim, ultimately allowing him to marry the princess. Locke wouldn't let the golden apple slip away. But without it, Jim couldn't marry the princess, and Locke couldn't complete his mission. After a moment's deliberation, Locke made a quick decision: never mind. It's just 200 potential points. There'll always be another chance. Locke and Jim then journeyed together, encountering Goldfish and the Ant King, just like in a fairy tale. Then, in a bird's nest atop a large forest tree, he saw the 3 most important crows. Locke was certain they were the crows because he sensed a magical presence within them. 2 old crows stood at the edge of the nest, unable to support the 3 crows, and decided to expel them. Relying on his ability to understand animal language, Jim was about to help the 3 crows when Locke, ahead of Jim, killed his horse and gave it to the crows. Jim was puzzled by Locke's behavior and asked tentatively, "Master Locke, why did you kill the horse? I saw the 3 little crows being driven from their nest by the old crow, and I suddenly wanted to help them. Whether they grow up and learn to fly on their own depends on their luck," Locke said calmly. The 3 crows helped Jim find the golden apple out of gratitude. Since they could help Jim, they could also help Locke. Locke, unwilling to pin his hopes on others, naturally had to seize such an opportunity himself. Jim initially wanted to test Locke's ability to understand animal language, but Locke's answer was completely accurate, so he had no choice but to believe Locke's explanation. After helping the 3 crows, the 2 continued on their journey, arriving at a new country. This country consisted of only one city, a common sight in fairy tales. Upon entering the city, Jim heard someone standing by a notice board, loudly announcing, "The princess is choosing a husband, but suitors must complete a difficult task. Failure to do so will result in their own death." Curious, Jim approached and overheard the citizens chattering about the princess's selection of a husband. They said that while the princess was incredibly beautiful, many had already lost their lives due to failing to fulfill the task. At first, Jim simply listened to this as anecdote, but when he saw the princess, he became distraught, muttering, "What a beautiful princess. She is like the moon in the sky. And not even the stars can block her radiance." Locke knew Jim was being seduced by her beauty. There was no shortage of people who had lost their lives to beauty. Sure enough, Jim soon decided to take the princess's test, even though many had already perished. The 2 of them arrived at the palace and met the king and princess. Upon seeing Jim, the king inquired about his background. When Jim explained that he was once a guard, Locke noticed the princess's disdainful expression. At this moment, Locke suddenly had an idea and spoke, "Jim, there's no need to hide your identity. After all, our enemy has been executed, and the kingdom has learned that your family was wrongly accused." Jim was stunned by Locke's words, but the king, curious, asked, "What's going on?" Jim is the eldest son of a great nobleman in Lawrence. His father was framed by a vicious enemy, and the king, mistaking him for a rebel, ordered his entire family to be executed. Jim narrowly escaped and hid in a neighboring kingdom under a false name. However, he didn't know that the ruling queen had already learned of his father's injustice and had executed the enemy who framed him. Before coming here, Jim said that if he could marry the princess, he would use the family's hidden treasure to purchase the surrounding lands, allowing the princess to live a prosperous life. Really, the princess finally piqued her interest and asked Jim with a smile, "You were originally a noble." Jim opened his mouth to retort, but Locke interrupted him with a pat on the shoulder. Locke continued, "Of course it's true. Although he's lost his title, his family's hidden treasure is enough to buy 10 manors. Now he's willing to risk his life for the princess and complete her mission." "Very good," the princess nodded happily, holding out a golden ring. "I will throw this ring into the sea, and you must retrieve it. If you can't, we will push you into the ocean until the waves swallow you." The guards then led Jim to the beach and, right in front of Jim, threw the ring into the water, watching as the water swallowed it. Jim was at a loss as to what to do next, as the crowd around him ranged from regret to laughter. After a brief moment of excitement, they eventually left. Locke watched from a distance, unfazed by the prospect of Jim finding the ring. Even if the goldfish didn't appear, Locke had already marked it, allowing him to find it at any time with magic. He was currently calculating how much money he should give Jim to marry the princess, and also how he needed to write a letter to the queen, asking her to cooperate in granting Jim a proper identity. Locke originally believed that without the golden apple, Jim would be unable to win the princess, and his mission would be impossible. However, during his recent meeting with the king and princess, Locke noticed that the princess was deeply dissatisfied with Jim's background, and this reminded him of a crucial point. The princess's refusal after Jim completed the first task, and her subsequent attempts at the second and third trials, stemmed from her disdain for his upbringing. According to the story, after Jim finally received the golden apple, he and the princess shared half, and the two fell in love. Locke suspected that the magical power of the golden apple had caused the princess, who had previously despised Jim's background, to fall in love with him. He couldn't possibly give the golden apple to Jim. So he had fabricated a story about Jim's noble background and wealth. Sure enough, the princess's expression on Jim's face had warmed considerably. If Jim truly possessed wealth, Locke could send a message to Queen Lawrence, which would vindicate him and grant him noble status. This way, the princess would no longer despise Jim because of his background. As long as the first task was completed, she would remain committed and continue to assign him more tasks. Locke would then complete his mission of helping Jim marry the princess and receive his reward. The money he spent was insignificant to Locke. In Locke's view, in the original story, Jim won the princess's love because of the magic of the golden apple, and now he won love because of the money Locke provided. There was no essential difference between the two. Chapter 152 Stop All Actions. What happened next was exactly as Locke had predicted. With the help of the goldfish, Jim retrieved the ring. While Jim was handing the ring to the guard watching over him, Locke explained that Jim was exhausted and needed to rest. He would meet the king and princess the next day. The guard agreed and returned to the palace. Locke then stopped Jim and said, "Jim, you should remember what I said on your behalf back at the palace." "Yes, Lord Locke, I don't understand why you lied to the king." "I was thinking of explaining it to them later," Jim said. "The reason is simple. The princess wouldn't marry an ordinary commoner." "Do you intend for her to live an ordinary life after marrying you?" Locke said slowly. "But a lie is a lie. It will be exposed sooner or later." "I have no money, and I'm not a noble," Jim said. "Don't worry. Answer me a question, and I'll give you a large sum of money. I'll also have the Queen of Lawrence prove your noble status." Locke smiled and said, "That way, your identity and wealth will no longer be lies, but real." "What's the question?" Jim asked, thinking it was a good idea. "Jim, I've noticed along the way that you seem to understand animals," Locke said. Lord Locke, what are you talking about? How can a human understand animals?" Jim tried to cover up his fear. "Honest Jim, you're not one to lie." "I could tell you were trying to cover up," Locke smiled and said, "Think about it. If you tell me the secret, you and the princess can live happily ever after. Isn't that what you want?" "Well," Jim hesitated for a moment before whispering, "Okay, Lord Locke, I'll tell you. The reason I can understand animals is because I ate the flesh of a white snake, which the king eats every day." "I understand, Jim," Locke smiled and nodded. "In that case, I'll keep my promise. I'll take you to buy a manor in some land, and I'll leave you a large sum of money." The next day, Jim arrived at the palace and met the king and princess. Upon learning that Jim, who had passed her test, was a wealthy man and a noble, the princess happily agreed to marry him. The two were soon married, with Locke attending as a friend and receiving his reward for completing a mission. Afterward, Locke returned alone to the forest where the three crows had been. Before he reached the tree, He heard a croaking sound from the sky. Looking up, he saw the three crows from before. They were delighted to see Locke and croaked. Locke immediately used his language comprehension to understand what the crows were saying. "Kind human, have you come to see us? I didn't expect you to grow up so quickly," Locke said. "Actually, I came here to ask for your help." "What do you need us for?" the three crows asked. "I've been searching for golden apples. You fly fast, and I want you to help me find them." "Tell me where to find the golden apple tree," Locke replied. "I see. Just wait for our good news." With that, a gust of wind swept the three crows away into the sky. Seeing the speed of the three crows and the gust of wind they whipped up, Locke knew they were likely magical beasts with special bloodlines. No wonder they were able to find the golden apple in the story. The three crows flew away, and Locke, not daring to wander, settled down near the forest. He built a wooden hut nearby and then went to a nearby city to buy some clothes and other necessities. As for food, he simply ate from the gourmet dining table. For over 6 months, Locke waited there until one day, when he heard the familiar crow's cries overhead. The three crows approached Locke and said, "We've flown across the sea and finally brought you the golden apple from the end of the world." Seeing the golden apple clutched by one of the crows, Locke couldn't help but feel excited. Then, noticing the three crows' bodies were disheveled, their feathers ruffled, he said, "Are you injured? I have some potions that should be helpful." Locke produced a crystal bottle and treated the three crows while listening to their stories of their search for the golden apple. From their descriptions, Locke finally pinpointed the location of the golden apple tree. It was indeed incredibly far away. No wonder the crows called it the end of the world. Knowing the tree's location, Locke didn't rush there immediately. Firstly, it was too far away, and secondly, according to the crow's descriptions, the tree's guards were formidable. Just as the queen had said, he was no match for them. Once the crows left, Locke opened his mouth without hesitation and took a bite of the golden apple. The golden apple tasted incredibly delicious. With one bite, Locke felt as if every cell in his body was craving it. He couldn't help but devour the entire apple in a few gulps. Then, Locke felt a strange transformation slowly taking place within him. It felt as if his perception of magic had become more acute than ever. He returned to his wooden hut and began meditating. When he opened his eyes again, a look of unmistakable surprise crossed his face. Just as the queen had said, consuming the golden apple would increase one's affinity with magic. Locke felt his meditation effects had more than doubled. Locke also discovered that the changes in his body hadn't completely stopped. He expected the effects of the golden apple to intensify over time until they fully took effect. It truly is a treasure from Western mythology. "My efforts have paid off," Locke said to himself with joy. He had spent 2 years in the fairy tale world, taking many detours along the way, but he had finally achieved his goal. At this point, Locke felt it was time to return to the American TV series world, so he contacted the system and chose to return. "The system's abilities are truly amazing," Locke sighed, checking the time. He had spent over 2 years in the fairy tale world, but only 2 hours had passed in the American TV series world. Recalling his time before entering the fairy tale world, Locke quickly recalled his meeting with Cypher. That meeting hadn't been pleasant. Cypher had wanted him to invest in a secret CIA project, but he had decisively declined. Whether Cypher had defected or was still working for the CIA, Locke didn't want to be involved in any of it. As for the Cordes family incident, which the other party had used to threaten Locke, Locke reviewed the entire operation and found no trace of his involvement. All of this was just speculation on Cypher's part. The only concern was if Damon and the others were captured and, under duress, coerced into confessing something damaging to Locke. Not to mention whether Damon and the others would betray Locke. Even if they did, Cypher wouldn't be able to do anything to Locke because there was no evidence. Locke was always very cautious. Even Damon, who had worked with him most, didn't have any evidence against Locke. For Cypher, spreading the news wouldn't have any real impact on Locke, at most. It would just spark rumors. Every high-ranking figure in the United States had his share of similar underlings. But caution was still necessary. With this in mind, Cypher called Damon via the encrypted satellite channel. "How's your operation going? Just confirmed the news is true," Damon said. "We're gathering our forces and planning our operation. All operations are suspended," Locke said decisively. "If there's any unforeseen situation, I'll explain it to you in person upon your return." "Everyone must come back." "No problem," Damon agreed decisively. I'll be right back. After hanging up, Locke breathed a sigh of relief. He was gathering his men. Given their cautious approach, the news had definitely not leaked. He believed Damon and Vanessa would obey his orders, and Kateria wouldn't do anything to harm him just to track down her enemy. As for Giselle, Locke frowned at this thought. He couldn't guarantee Giselle wouldn't do anything, considering the hundreds of millions of dollars involved. But perhaps this could be seen as a test for her. Now that Cypher had set his sights on him, Locke believed she wouldn't give up so easily. He first needed to confirm Cypher's true purpose and whether he was still working for the CIA. In Locke's opinion, it would be best if Cypher had already left the CIA. That would at least mean he wasn't being targeted by these federal law enforcement agencies. To Locke, these law enforcement agencies were far more formidable than a single super spy. If they were truly targeted, they would be watching Locke's every move with a magnifying glass, making everything he did in the future very difficult. Chapter 153 I Will Solve the Problem. After explaining everything to Damon, Locke reviewed everything he'd done in the United States. Only after confirming that there were no issues did he finally relax. It's because they've risen so quickly. Compared to those established families, they still lack some foundation, Locke lamented. A few days later, Damon, Vanessa, Kateria, and Giselle returned to New York. Upon meeting Locke, Giselle's first question was, "What's going on?" "We've already started thinking about what to do. It's a minor problem," Locke said, handing Lorraine Brown's file to the others. "Take a look at it first." "What do you mean?" "Let us see the file on a dead CIA agent." Vanessa frowned slightly. "She's not dead, or perhaps her death is a cover," Locke said. "She approached me not long ago. She seems to have guessed our actions in Mexico and wants a $40 million investment from me. Based on the information, she's a very troublesome individual," Damon said. "An ace spy? Her actions in Berlin are classic. Since she guessed we'd eliminated the Cordes family, perhaps she'll also be aware of your next move since you're staying in Mexico." As Locke spoke, the phone beside him suddenly rang. Looking at the caller ID, Locke frowned, gestured to Damon and the others, left the room, and answered the call. "Ms. Sever, I've already said I have no intention of getting involved in the CIA's business. Let's get straight to the point," Sever said from the other end of the line. "I've noticed you've accessed my CIA data. Although you did it very secretly, no one noticed, but that doesn't include me. Are you ready to come clean, then?" "I have nothing to do with what you're talking about the Cordes family," Locke said calmly. "I have no interest in what you're planning to do next, and I have no intention of getting involved. So I hope this is the last time we talk." "That's not certain. Perhaps after hearing this person's voice, you'll change your mind." Sever put the phone away, seemingly addressing someone else. "Come on, our little genius, talk to your friend. It seems your troubles aren't completely resolved yet." Peggy's voice came from the other end. "Peggy," Locke took a breath and said, "Don't worry, I'll get you out soon." "Well, I think I have enough leverage to get $80 million from you now," Sever said leisurely. "Give me 5 days. You can choose bank transfer or cash." Locke didn't bargain. 3 days, transfer directly to the account I specify. "I'll give you the account number." 3 days later, Cypher hadn't expected Locke to agree so readily. She had been prepared for him to bargain, and it seemed her guess was correct. Locke truly cared about this girl. "Okay," Locke said, and hung up. "What's wrong?" When Locke returned to the room, Damon, who knew him well, noticed something was wrong. "Nothing. You stay in New York for the next few days and plan how to get the Cordes family's money. During this time, I'll take care of this problem," Locke said. With Locke's current status, the CIA would never resort to outright kidnapping and ransom. They wouldn't easily offend a billionaire. So, Locke was certain Cypher had defected and was now operating on her own, most likely to blackmail him to raise funds. "Do I look like I'm easy to bully?" Thinking of this, a hint of ruthlessness flashed in Locke's eyes. "Ms. Sever, maybe I can let her experience her new gains in the fairy tale world." Night enveloped the suburbs of New York City. On a hillside, 2 people stared at a villa in the distance. One of the observers said, "The rain at night is really annoying. I don't know why we were arranged to guard here. Is there anyone who can break through the defense of the villa? Who knows, but since we got the money, we have to work as required." The other person fiddled with a loaded sniper rifle. "It's hard for me to imagine why the lady is so cautious. There are more than 50 people in the villa, and it has been professionally arranged. Unless a large force is mobilized, no one can break through. Maybe the army will come. I heard that the kidnapped little girl is worth $80 million. Who is the daughter of that big family? As the observer spoke, he observed the movements around the villa with a military telescope, but after a moment, he felt something was wrong. Why didn't his companion speak? This immediately alerted him. Turning his head, he saw a figure in full armor standing nearby. He opened his mouth to call for help, but the next moment he was unconscious. All right, both observation posts have been taken care of. Based on their reporting frequency, they'll be aware of the situation in 3 minutes at most, Locke silently calculated, glancing at the villa a few hundred meters away. Looks like it's time for a formal visit. As the clock ticked down to 10 o'clock in the evening, Locke reached the side wall of the villa, swooped over it, and strolled to the back of the villa with a leisurely pace. A patrol of guards happened to pass by. One of the guards, seemingly in a hurry to urinate, approached the wall and began waterproofing. Just as he was enjoying himself, Locke approached with a leisurely demeanor, grabbed the man by the combat vest from behind, and casually stabbed him. Without displaying incredible speed, the cold blade flashed by, and the man made no sound. No struggle, no resistance. Complete silence. Something's happening. At this moment, the surveillance officer inside the villa said to Sefer, "Lot's missing. He seemed to have slipped away to urinate, but he's nowhere to be found on any of the surveillance footage." Sefer approached the surveillance cameras and scanned the 7 or 8 screens, but found nothing. Meanwhile, Locke, clad in black armor and a black helmet visor, walked eerily and calmly toward a patrol unit in the cold, rainy night. As Locke approached, the patrol members noticed Locke, knife in hand, and immediately prepared to attack. But the result was a silent death, 1 man, 1 sword. The entire patrol, 4 men, fell asleep peacefully, as if they had been greeted good night. Locke's movement seemed neither swift nor sharp, yet they were perfectly timed to kill each man, leaving them no time to cry out or fire. This was Locke's first complete demonstration of his mastery of the art of fire, all the data flowing through his mind. Although he had swaggered into the villa with only a knife, the villa's surveillance cameras hadn't captured any trace of him, and the patrol officers outside hadn't noticed anything either. The second team has disappeared too. They were supposed to pass through here, but are they just slacking off? The surveillance officer said. Perhaps we have visitors, Cypher said, shouting, "Everyone, get moving. We're invading." Then, Cypher looked at Peggy and asked, "Who do you think is coming this time? Didn't you already guess?" Peggy smiled at Cypher. Chapter 154 Slavery. At the same time, Locke, having dispatched the 2 patrols outside, casually grabbed the guards' guns and, armed with both weapons, walked directly through the villa's main entrance. The security cameras at the main entrance caught this moment. Locke's appearance, clad in armor, startled Sever. She personally orchestrated the villa's defenses. There are practically no blind spots. Entering from any angle would be undetectable, yet this person actually went straight through the main entrance. This is unbelievable. The moment Locke opened the door, he was spotted. His actions were so brazen that even ordinary people wouldn't have missed his sudden appearance. At that moment, everyone in the first-floor lobby turned their gaze to Locke, standing in the entrance, clad in black armor, complete with a helmet and visor. Sever, staring intently at the security cameras, watched Locke glance at him calmly as he scanned the area. Locke was simply counting. There were 41 people on the first floor. His brain had already recorded each person's position and the arrangement of the furniture, and he began analyzing them using the gun and artillery model. Everything happened in a flash. The guards inside the villa finally reacted. Regardless of whether the black-armored figure before them was mad or high, they didn't waste any time. Kill him. He'd barely begun to speak when Locke launched his attack. Da-da-da-da, a barrage of gunfire erupted like raindrops. At that moment, Cypher, watching the surveillance camera, witnessed a terrifying phenomenon. Dozens of men, combined fire, couldn't even hide a single individual so close. The armored figure stalked the villa, ablaze with bullets, firing with 2 pistols, seemingly at random, displaying no rapid-fire technique or aiming. Yet, inevitably, someone fell. Not a single bullet struck him. He was a ghost, a breath of death from hell. As he entered the room, everyone opened fire, yet the man, who should have been riddled with bullets, leisurely wandered among the bullets. Everyone here was a professionally trained elite, yet despite their frantic aim and fire, no bullet could even reach him. It felt like the most absurd nightmare. Locke now roamed the villa, relying on his advanced firearm skills. Even the carefully planned firing points and angles by the most professional personnel were powerless to harm him. To Cypher, every movement of the armored figure seemed to mislead those around him, like a magician whose next move was unpredictable. From the first to the second floor, everyone rushed to support, but soon only half remained. The 2 guns Locke had just received from the guards were empty. Instead of retrieving his weapons from the dimensional space, he threw them away and looked at the man in front of him. Despair filled him. In a matter of moments, he had emptied 3 magazines. The barrels of his guns were burning, but the bullets rained down, missing the man in front of him. It wasn't until he saw Locke throw his gun that he grasped at a lifeline, shouting, "He's out of bullets." As soon as he finished speaking, he was speechless. Locke passed by him like a gust of wind, and he collapsed to the ground with a thud, as if his soul had been drained away. The remaining people, just as hope rose, were quickly plunged into deeper despair as they discovered that after Locke drew his knife, his killing efficiency had not decreased at all, if not increased. Soon, everyone fell to the ground. Locke glanced at a surveillance camera and smiled faintly. "What? You should be happy to see me, right? Who are you?" Taking a deep breath, Cypher barely managed to suppress the panic in her heart. She had certainly seen a lot, but this was the first time she had ever witnessed such a ghostly scene, like the Grim Reaper of Death, whose blade reaped life, leaving someone dead with each passing. "Let's go." Watching Locke on the surveillance camera approaching the upper floor, Cypher, oblivious to everything else, grabbed Peggy, untied the ropes binding her to the chair, lifted her up, opened the window, and prepared to leap out. Crack, swish, the sound of the door opening was accompanied by a flash of a knife. A long wound appeared on Cypher's leg, causing her movements to become distorted, and she collided with a windowsill. Swish, another flash of a knife pierced the panicked surveillance officer's neck. Locke stepped in front of the surveillance officer and drew his knife. Then he looked at Cypher, who was shielding Peggy in front of him, his pistol pointed at her head. "How did you find this place?" Cypher stared at Locke intently. Although his armor and helmet made it impossible to tell who he was, Cypher instinctively knew it was Locke. Locke looked up at Cypher, but without replying. The magic ring beneath her glove flickered, and the next moment, a beam of light pierced her eyes. Snap! Cypher dropped her gun, clutching her head and trembling on the ground. "Okay, it's all right now." Locke picked Peggy up and rubbed her head. The altered electronic voice made Peggy frown, saying, "Your outfit is really ugly." Smiling without saying anything, Locke walked over to the surveillance camera and began to operate it, quickly erasing all the data before turning to Cypher. "Why don't you kill her?" Peggy asked quietly, watching Cypher regain his feet. "You're so young, don't keep talking about things like this." Locke tapped Peggy's forehead and said to Cypher, "Clean up all traces here and come see me tomorrow, as you command, my master." Cypher nodded slowly, speaking respectfully to Locke. "This is..." Peggy blinked, watching Cypher standing before Locke, his face full of loyalty. "What's going on?" After leaving the villa and getting into the car, Peggy looked at Locke and asked. "A special spell." Locke didn't elaborate, stating that this was actually a type of magic he had learned from the queen in the fairy tale world. It can directly enslave a person's mind, turning them into one's own slave, without compromising their normal thinking. This spell can only be used on ordinary people, and has no effect on magicians. It was through this magic that the queen persuaded several nobles who opposed her and took control of the kingdom of Lawrence. Honestly, this magic is somewhat malicious. Locke hadn't tried it since learning it, but he had no concerns about using it on Cypher. Chapter 155 Trivial Arrangements. After returning to his New York home with Peggy, Locke spent the entire evening chatting with her. Feeling she had finally settled down, he coaxed her, exhausted, to bed. Then came a visit from Cypher, who this time confessed everything, hiding nothing. Though seemingly unchanged, Cypher had indeed fallen completely under Locke's spell. After completing the Berlin mission, Lorraine Broughton became the CIA's most successful and feared operative. This prompted the higher-ups to dedicate themselves to completely burying some of the secrets. However, Lorraine Broughton sensed the danger ahead. During a mission, due to a leak of inside information, she perished in an explosion, her body completely destroyed. However, Lorraine Broughton had successfully faked her own death and escaped, becoming Cypher now. She wanted to establish her own organization, no longer working for anyone else. Since she needed money to build an organization, Lorraine carefully selected Locke, a billionaire with a seemingly simple background. After Lorraine finished explaining, Locke began to reflect quietly. If he hadn't learned this magic in the fairy tale world, he would have likely killed the person before him. But now, the most suitable job for this woman was to be his black glove. When it came to handling those shady matters, Lorraine Broughton was far more suited than Damon and Vanessa, both in terms of ability, personality, and methods. This woman had established a supercriminal organization in the future and had nearly successfully launched a nuclear bomb. If it weren't for the aura of the racing family, she would have succeeded long ago. With this in mind, Locke wrote down an account number, along with a corresponding token, password, and code, and handed it to Lorraine Broughton. This unnamed bank safe contains approximately $10 million. Take it and use it. I need an organization that obeys my orders completely, yet has no connection to me. It would be my honor, Master. Lorraine Broughton's eyes gleamed with enthusiasm. I have recognized my previous mistakes. Now I am willing to do anything for you, Master. I promise to do my best to complete every task you instruct me to do. Watching Lorraine Broughton leave, Locke warned himself that while the feeling of total control over someone was indeed exhilarating, he must not become addicted to it. Finally, Locke called Damon and the others to inform them that the alert had been lifted, allowing them to continue their operations in Mexico. Although Peggy was only slightly frightened, Locke spent the rest of the summer traveling with her around the United States to comfort her. Even matters concerning the fund company were handled by phone and fax. Returning to New York at the end of August, Locke made final arrangements for the financial markets and quietly awaited the harvest. Unexpectedly, Damon arrived with good news. You really should have come with us. That's 3.5 walls of US dollars, $300 million, and 7.5 tons of gold, Damon excitedly described to Locke. Even though he didn't care much for money, the sight of the mountain of US dollars still made him feel overwhelmed. We thought we had enough bags to carry all the money, but it wasn't enough. Thanks to you, boss, for preparing more transportation methods, we were able to haul it all. Did anything unexpected happen? Locke asked. There was a minor incident, but it's been dealt with. Vanessa said. We've already shipped the money into the country. Now it's up to you. Someone will come to you. Their commission on money laundering will be based on the rules. Locke nodded and looked at the others. We'll have results in a month at most. The laundered funds will be transferred to a designated account, and the source will be traceable worldwide. Then I'll wait for good news, Giselle said. They had no objection to the commission on money laundering. It had been agreed upon in advance and was a completely fair price. After everything was settled, Damon and the others left, and Locke kept Catalia behind, primarily to tell her about their enemy, Luis Don. The matter in Mexico was completely resolved, and Locke saw no need to keep it secret any longer. I found out. Luis Don is hiding at 867 Alessandro Street in New Orleans. Locke slowly recounted the information he had gathered from the movie. Really, finally receiving news of her long-held enemy, Catalia was filled with excitement. She had undergone rigorous assassin training since the age of 9, her sole motivation for persevering, revenge. I have only one request. Locke produced a bank account. Deposit all of Louis Tang's earnings over the years into this account. This account belonged to Lorraine Broughton. The $10 million was just the initial expenses. If the organization wanted to rapidly expand, subsequent funding would be necessary. Locke estimated that, combined with Louis Tang's funds, this would be enough for Lorraine Broughton to lay the foundation. He wouldn't have to invest anything further, just sit back and reap the benefits. Don't worry, boss. Give me a week and I'll take care of everything. Very well. Once the funds are confirmed, you can take some time off. I'll contact you if there's a mission, but otherwise, you can live your life. Compared to Catalia, who was simply a killer, Lorraine Broughton was more suited to leading an underground organization. Locke simply kept Catalia Locke as a simple assassin, contacting him when needed. Even Damon could focus solely on the security company, no longer completing missions like those for the Cordes family. A week later, when Locke saw Catalia again, he felt that her previous bitterness and vengeance had vanished. It was as if she had let go of something and found a new lease on life. She got over it so quickly, Locke wondering if it wasn't just revenge, but perhaps she'd fallen in love, just like in the plot. After a brief pause, Locke didn't intend to delve into the matter, simply confirming that Catalia had transferred $73 million into Lorraine Broughton's account. He believed that after being a killer for so long, Kateria would find it difficult to return to normal life, just like a soldier finds it difficult to integrate into normal life after leaving the army. Most of Louis Tang's income over the years has been taken away by the CIA. This is part of the laundered funds he hid. Another portion was transferred to Colombia. Louis Tang's account books are vague, making it difficult to trace quickly, Kateria explained. He frowned at the news that some of the money was still missing. In his previous life, he'd heard there were plans for a sequel to Deadly Black Orchid, but he hadn't seen it until he traveled through time. However, given the typical nature of these films, it was likely to involve it being related to Louis Tang returning for revenge. Thinking of this, Locke asked Kateria, "Does Louis Tang have any descendants or family?" Hearing Locke's words, Kateria suddenly frowned. "From what I know, Louis Tang doesn't seem to have any relatives. Given Louis Tang's age, he must have children. You're not planning on letting his family go, are you?" Locke looked at Kateria. "Of course not. I don't want Louis Tang's children to ever seek revenge on me." Kateria looked thoughtful. "I knew Louis Tang back then, and he didn't have any family back then. If he did, it would only be after he came to America." "I'll find out," Locke nodded. This was Kateria's business, and Locke was merely reminding her. He wouldn't question her next steps. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Investment Cooperation. Sheldon recently told me about an interesting idea, creating a database of research funding, Peggy told Locke. Most of the time, donors donate casually, which means many people in need donate without knowing about the grants available. This leads to projects being delayed or even abandoned due to lack of funds. If we could create a database of research funding, we could maximize the use of these funds. It seems Sheldon is still a little reluctant, Locke said with a smile. That's right, Peggy said. So when he told me about this idea, he said he was helping me make money, but I think it's just something he owes me. What do you think? It's a simple internet application, Locke said. It does have some value. If you're interested, you can invest. I can lend you my team of lawyers and managers. Let's consider it a joint investment. What do you think we should ask for? 50%, Peggy asked with a smile. It seems you're far from being a black-hearted capitalist, Locke said. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be surprised to demand 90% or even kick Sheldon out and do it themselves. You guessed right. The principal's condition for Sheldon is that the school keeps 90%, Peggy said. I don't really care about how much I earn anyway, so there's no need to go too far. It's understandable. The school is taking advantage of Sheldon because he's a kid, Locke shrugged. Even hired professors get 25%. In the highly commercialized United States, universities are also businesses. Not only do universities leverage the reputation of scientists to receive large donations, but their contracts with these scientists and professors clearly state that 75% of any ideas generated during their tenure belong to the university. When Locke first saw this on The Big Bang Theory, his first reaction was that this was a truly unfair clause. But no matter how much you don't care about money, you should at least guarantee controlling interest. So, let's take 60% initially, and then see how we invest later, Locke said. For internet-related companies, profitability takes time. Locke wouldn't care about his small database business, and Peggy just thought it was fun. She probably wouldn't be interested in selling it to Locke once the project was complete. Locke, on the other hand, believed that any business project shouldn't allow Sheldon any operational rights. If he were to take control, he'd be tempted to dictate everything, which would be a disaster. That's why he demanded 60%. Let's do it, Locke concluded. I'll arrange for someone to contact you and Sheldon's parents to sign the contract. Aren't you going to be there in person? Peggy asked. I'm going to Europe in a couple of days. There's real business going on there, Locke said. I thought we could become partners, Peggy said, a little disappointed. There will be opportunities later, Locke said with a smile. And you don't need to worry about these things. Focusing on scientific research is the real thing. 4 days later, Locke flew to England, this time on the Yu Ying family's private jet, accompanied by Deborah Yu Ying. Sitting on the plane, Deborah was clearly in high spirits. Everyone knows the news in Europe. That big deal you mentioned when you took out a loan, right? Opportunities like this, blatantly robbing a country, Don't come along easily. It looks like the money I invested in you will ultimately yield even more than I imagined. How did you manage to be so certain of this happening so early on? No one knows for sure. I simply read a possibility through various sources and placed a bet. It's that simple, Locke said calmly. It was just a simple bet on the future. It looks like you won in the end. We won together. Locke raised his glass and gestured to Deborah. Then let's celebrate. The two clinked their glasses and happily drank together. So, what are you planning to invest in next? Deborah put down her glass and inquired. I don't know the exact figure, but I'm sure you've made a fortune that would be the envy of my grandfather. My investment direction has never been a secret, Locke shrugged. Banking, high-tech, and media. With this money, I'll naturally expand my investments in these areas. I can also pay off my previous loans. I don't think the bank will mind if you extend the loan period, Deborah said. I should take risks when necessary, but normally, I don't want to push my capital to the limit, Locke said. Because that means if something goes wrong, there's no room for maneuver. You're truly a smart person, Deborah Yowing nodded. Do you have any suggestions? Or maybe once I get my money, I'll buy all of it in Wells Fargo shares. Hearing Deborah's intentions of going all in on Wells Fargo shares, Locke felt she was planning to rely on him. Even without his influence, this investment would bring significant returns in the future. It was indeed a very worthwhile investment, and Locke had no reason to stop it. If Deborah could recognize her own role, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem was that this beautiful woman before him was clearly not one to settle for a comfortable position. She represented more than just the tens of millions of dollars she had invested. If you want to cooperate, Locke considered it for a moment, then said, you could invest more in Disney. I'm acquiring shares in Time Warner, so we might have a chance to work together in the future. Are you sure we're partners, not competitors? Deborah Yowing said with a smile. Besides, tens of millions of dollars won't buy you much equity in Disney. This is a long-term partnership, and I can't control a large media conglomerate like Time Warner in a short period of time, Locke said. If you can help me acquire more Wells Fargo shares, at least 5%, I'll accept an $8 million investment in the Sky Fund investment project I control, but I won't ask where the investment goes. For $20 million, I can help you acquire an 8% stake in Wells Fargo, Deborah Yowing said. It's too much? At most, $12 million. And the shareholders I have already contacted don't count. After some haggling, the two finally reached an agreement. Deborah would help Locke acquire an 8% stake in Wells Fargo, and Locke would then grant her a $15 million investment. Locke then calculated that if successful, by the end of the year, he could have a stake of over 38% in Wells Fargo, giving him a controlling stake. This would greatly benefit Locke's future capital flows in the United States and globally. And he had the final say on how much profit Deborah's money would bring him. Chapter 157 The Missing Crawfords. It's really convenient to have your own plane. As the plane landed at London Airport, Locke sighed, looking at the moon in the sky. You can definitely buy your own plane now. It wouldn't be difficult for you, Deborah Yowing said. Don't be like Randit. Enjoy what you deserve. I've already ordered 3 planes, 2 for my staff and 1 for myself. The designer is drawing up the designs according to my specifications, but it'll take another 2 years to get it. Locke shrugged and said, I'll be very busy in London. If you want to have fun, you'll probably have to find someone else to accompany you. Don't worry about me, Deborah Yowing said. I have an aunt in London, but I'd rather see your house first. If you like, you can stay as long as you like. Locke raised an eyebrow. Why don't you go and see it now? I think my aunt wouldn't mind if I visit her tomorrow morning. Deborah smiled and hugged Locke's arm. That night, the Texas cowgirl attempted to tame a dragon, but the dragon's power was beyond her imagination. Ultimately, she exhausted herself, was overcome by the dragon, and was forced to beg for mercy. The next day, Locke made breakfast for Deborah Yowing. After leaving the manor, he retrieved the anti-eavesdropping device and FM radio he had assembled from his storage space. He used these to thoroughly inspect the entire property, finding 6 bugs. He then used the FM radio to check again while playing music and wearing headphones, finally feeling relieved. The discovery of bugs in his own residence wasn't surprising to Locke, especially after his Sky Fund, which had recently profited handsomely from the British pound crisis. Although Locke was operating behind Soros and wasn't as prominent, Sky Fund's net profit of $756 million alone was enough to draw attention. In fact, since October, Many wealthy individuals had expressed interest in entrusting their funds to him, specifically projects that Locke personally oversaw. When such requests come in, Locke usually attaches certain conditions, such as helping to acquire company shares or purchase certain properties, but few collaborations are achieved. As a second-best option, many wealthy individuals have invested their spare cash in guaranteed, fixed-income investments, leading to an ever-increasing amount of funds managed by Sky Fund. That afternoon, members of Locke's European Asset Management Office arrived at the manor to brief Locke on recent European investments. Locke's European Asset Management Office is separate from its U.S. counterpart, essentially concealing assets. The majority of Locke's current offshore returns are now being placed there. As early as last year, the Asset Management Office had compiled a list of hundreds of investment targets. Taking advantage of the European economic crisis, Locke completed 57 acquisitions or investments in just over 2 months. These primarily include wineries, ranches, castles, resort hotels, shares in luxury goods companies, ports, and shares in British electricity and water companies. These massive acquisitions cost a total of $1.647 billion, and most were acquired at bargain prices, representing a significant bargain. Locke's main purpose in England was to make some arrangements for these businesses. He would likely be in London for over a month, then travel around Europe. Christmas was coming, so he wouldn't have time to return to the US. Since arriving in London, Locke had been flooded with invitations to numerous banquets. For the first month, due to his overwhelming workload, Locke only occasionally attended the more important ones. A month later, while shuffling through a thick stack of invitations, Locke discovered one from Lara Croft, inviting him to join her on a noble hunting trip. That morning, at 8 o'clock, the carriage arrived at Croft Manor. Within 10 minutes, an English thoroughbred horse was seen charging towards them from a distance. Lara, dressed in a lady's riding uniform, rode straight towards them, not pulling the reins until she was 10 meters away, stopping 2 or 3 meters in front of Locke. "Long time no see, Mr. Locke." The 13-year-old Lara dismounted and greeted Locke. Lara, now transitioning from a young girl to a young woman, already had a glimpse of her future self, seemingly closer to her in-game counterpart and distinct from the 2 generations of actors in the film. "Good morning, Laura," Locke nodded with a serious look. "I have heard about the Countess Crawford and his wife. I am deeply sorry about this. I believe they are just missing and must be waiting for rescue somewhere." A sad look flashed in Laura's eyes, and then she said, "I asked you to come here this time because I have something to ask you. Just say it. The Countess Crawford and his wife are my friends, and I am willing to help with anything I can," Locke said with a smile. "Before my parents disappeared, they said they were planning an expedition. I also know they called you to discuss a lot of things. I wanted to ask if you know where they disappeared. Lord Crawford did ask me a lot about Asian history, especially about a Japanese queen," Locke frowned. "But unfortunately, I don't know where they were going on this expedition. I only know they were supposedly going to Japan, but I can't guess exactly where." "Is that so?" Laura showed a hint of disappointment, but then pressed on. "Which Japanese queen was it?" "It was the extremely famous Queen Himiko of ancient Japan." Locke said this when he suddenly received a prompt. He glanced at it and frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Seeing Locke stunned, Laura couldn't help but ask. "There are many legends about her. The most amazing one is that she can control storms and has the magical power to make people immortal," Locke said, "and so far, archaeologists have not found the burial place of Himiko. Most likely, your parents found some clues related to Himiko's tomb." "Really?" "In other words, if we find clues related to Himiko, we can find my parents," Laura asked happily, holding Locke's hand. "It's difficult," Locke said in a deep voice. "For so many years, no one has found any clues. It will not be easy to find it in a short time, unless we can find something from your parents' research, but I've searched through all the things my parents left behind during this period, and I didn't find anything," Laura said anxiously. "Did they say anything when they talked to you?" "They just asked some questions about the history and legends of Himiko. I don't know anything else," Locke shook his head. "I can help you check, but I'm not sure when I can find enough clues." "Really?" Laura showed a surprised expression. "Thank you for your help. After my parents disappeared, because I was not yet an adult, I couldn't use the family's money to hire someone to search, and I could only insure my daily expenses. But if you find my parents, I will definitely double your compensation. In addition, I will also check the things my parents left behind to see if there are any new discoveries. Money is just a small matter. Earl Crawford is also my friend. I would be happy to help, Locke said with a smile. Chapter 158 missed. The two chatted as they headed towards the manor house. Around 9 o'clock, Locke looked at Laura, who was slung over her single-barreled hunting rifle, and said with a smile, "That's not a ladylike outfit. It's certainly not what a lady should do." Laura smiled, glancing at Locke. "If I were you, I wouldn't wear high leather riding boots. I'd wear high rubber rain boots with a wider, more breathable cuff. I rarely sweat," Locke said with a smile. After packing up, the two drove to the hunting grounds, over 10 kilometers away. Winter weather gets dark quickly, so hunting usually takes place mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Lunch consists of pre-prepared sandwiches and ham. Standing beside the Land Rover, he and Laura ate their prepared lunch while observing their fellow hunters. Most of the participants this time were British aristocrats or wealthy capitalists. The person who had greeted Locke earlier was a shareholder of the Bank of England. Moments later, a young man in his 20s, holding a sandwich and a small steel coffee cup, approached with a grin and greeted, "Hey, Laura, is this your new friend, Locke Lee?" "This is Andrew, the Duke's son," Laura casually introduced, then stopped talking. Andrew, however, continued to smile. It's rare to see Laura invite friends over. "How about a competition to see who can hunt the most grouse? You seem confident in your shooting skills and want to make some extra cash," Locke said with a smile. "He just can't accept losing to me last time, so he wants to get back at you," Laura pointed out without hesitation. "I was just unlucky last time," Andrew couldn't help but say. Losing to a little girl in a hunt is not something to be praised. "How about another competition?" Laura looked at Andrew with a half-smile. "Forget it, I don't want to pick on a little girl," Andrew said sternly, then, after a few words of deliberation, left. "You don't seem to like him much," Locke said, watching Andrew walk away. "He's just a playboy who likes to go to bars and nightclubs," Laura shrugged. Locke wasn't surprised. While most of the nobility had fallen on hard times, some still held considerable assets. While they lacked real power, their status was high enough to afford a comfortable meal and enjoy their daily lives. By 3 in the afternoon, the sky was beginning to darken and a drizzle began to fall. Laura glanced at the game being loaded onto the car and said, "Want to go deer hunting?" "Sure," Locke agreed. They grabbed their Remington M700, packed their camping backpacks, and drove off together. Glancing at Locke, who had barely fired his gun all day, Laura couldn't reach his shoulder due to his size, so she could only pat his arm. "Would you like to shoot first? I hope I don't make a fool of myself," Locke said modestly with a smile, reaching a hilltop. He pulled a small telescope from his windbreaker pocket, handed it to Laura, and pointed to a reddish-brown figure beneath a distant rock. "That's probably a fox out looking for food," he said. Foxes are semi-hibernating animals. In winter, they sleep when there's food, and come out to forage when there's none. Laura glanced over there and nodded. "Are you sure you can get it with one shot? Don't let it get away. Foxes are not easy to hunt. They are very alert, making it difficult to find them, let alone shoot them. Therefore, hunting usually involves using hounds to find, chase, and surround them before riding close on horseback to kill them." Locke estimated the distance, only about 100 meters. He smiled, released the safety, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! A gunshot rang out. Laura watched the fox struggle for a few seconds before falling motionless. She patted Locke's arm happily. "Very good. Hit the mark. I thought you scientists didn't know how to hunt. You were just saying you were worried about making a fool of yourself, so why didn't you fire a single shot?" "It seems you need some time to get to know me," Locke shrugged. "I really like Eastern culture. They generally don't like to show off." "It seems you know a lot about Eastern culture," Laura said with a smile. "No wonder my dad said you have a deep understanding of Asian history. I speak Mandarin and have read the 4 great classics." "I'm a China expert, right?" Locke smiled. "If I get a chance, I can even let you try some of my Eastern cuisine. Then I'll have to find a chance to visit you," Laura said with a grin. As darkness fell, Locke and Laura returned together, not to Laura's estate, but to attend a banquet that evening, hosted by Andrew. Having just finished hunting, everyone dressed casually for dinner. The main course was the day's catch, the grilled grouse, tender and delicious. After dinner, Andrew got the group together to play cards, even inviting Locke. Laura, however, showed no interest and wandered off somewhere. While Las Vegas may be world famous, the UK's gambling industry is also highly developed, with more relaxed regulations. An hour later, when Laura returned, she found everyone at the table glum, save for the calm Locke. Andrew, in particular, had lost £1,000, enough for 2 or 3 nights at the bar. After dropping Laura off, Locke returned to his house on Kensington Garden Street, activated the system, and once again checked the newly popped-up World Quest. In the Mist world, surviving 3 days in the fog rewards a base reward of 800 potential points. Furthermore, the more townspeople survive in the supermarket and the more monsters killed, the more potential points are rewarded. The plot of the movie Mist is simple. An American town is suddenly enveloped by fog. The film's protagonists, David Raymond and his son Billy Raymond, are trapped with a group of people in a large town supermarket. A fog teems with unprecedented monsters, seemingly from another dimension and extremely deadly to ordinary people. While trapped, many are bewitched by a mysterious woman who claims the disaster is a punishment from God. The fog itself appears to be linked to a secret military experiment. Finally, the protagonist, along with his son and a few others who haven't been bewitched, rushes out in search of safety. After a near-death struggle, the 5 of them finally get into a car and drive out of town. They wait until the car's fuel tank is low, and the roars of countless monsters rise from the fog. Determined to ensure a peaceful death for those around him, the protagonist uses his 4 remaining bullets to kill his son and 3 others, then exits the car and rushes into the fog to confront the monsters. However, the fog gradually dissipates, and the protagonist watches as the military restores order. The monsters' roars are merely the screams of their victims. Thus, what could have been a happy ending turned into a tragic story. The film's plot was simple and seemingly easy. But Locke felt it was better to proceed with caution to avoid any unexpected twists and turns. Looks like I need to prepare more, Locke thought, reflecting on the plot of The Mist. Chapter 159 Temporary Mission. Woo-woo-woo. After 2 days of preparation, upon arriving in the foggy world, Locke's first sound was the piercing wail of an air raid sirens. Then, he found himself inside a supermarket. The siren drew the attention of the people inside, while Locke observed the surroundings. The supermarket was surrounded by reinforced concrete walls on 3 sides, but the front was a vast expanse of reinforced glass panels, lacking even a thin metal roller shutter. Everyone gathered in front of the glass wall, and then saw an old man with blood on his chest running from the square in front of the supermarket. Something's in the fog. They've taken John Lee. He had barely entered the supermarket when a thick fog spread. Everyone was in a state of panic and bewilderment. Some rushed out, trying to find their cars and get home. But the fog spread quickly, reaching the front of the supermarket before anyone could react. Those inside could only hear their heartbreaking screams. Because of yesterday's storm, the phone signal had long been cut off. The thick fog, coupled with the occasional screams from outside, filled everyone with panic. The next moment, the ground began to shake violently, sending goods from supermarket shelves and ceiling chandelier panels crashing down. When the shaking subsided, someone couldn't help but exclaim, "It must be an earthquake. The smoke outside must be from a chemical plant leak." The speaker was Norton, a black lawyer. He'd come to the town for vacation. After all, its beautiful scenery and sparse crowds made it a perfect place to relax. But the sudden disaster had terrified him, and he deeply regretted buying a vacation home here, which had led him to his current situation. "Is anyone hurt?" "Everyone, stay here and don't go out," someone said. "No," a woman with a short haircut suddenly said, "I can't stay here. I have to get back to see my children." "No, you can't go out. Death is outside. This is the end of the world," the mysterious woman in the movie said. "Everyone, stay calm," someone continued. "But I can't do that. My 2 children are at home, and Wanda's taking care of little Victor. He's only 8, and sometimes she even forgets to look after him." Locke watched the plot unfold quietly, listening to the newly announced quests, wondering if the risk for 100 reward points was worth it. "Please, can someone help me?" the flat-headed woman pleaded, glancing at the people around her. No one spoke. It was obvious that the danger outside was extreme, and no one was willing to risk their lives out of pity. We were all ordinary people, and there weren't many heroes in life. Locke couldn't help but complain about the crew's cost-saving. Not to mention hiring a celebrity, there weren't even any particularly beautiful female characters. Seeing everyone reject the flat-headed woman's request, she gradually fell into despair. Locke then said, Locke Lee, FBI Special Investigations Agent, Locke produced an ID, actually a system-prepared identity, complete with all the necessary identification documents. He raised his hand high in a gesture, then said, "We are now entering emergency procedures. Everyone, obey my orders." Oh my God. Thank God. What the hell is going on, Agent? What exactly happened? As Locke spoke, everyone looked at him and began to barge in with questions, not giving Locke time to speak. Bang! Locke pulled out a gun and fired a single shot, shocking everyone. "All right, everyone. Hold your breath until I give you permission." Locke glanced around and said, "I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but if you want to survive, you'd better obey my orders. I need someone to help me arrange for the rescue." He then looked at David, the protagonist, and Ollie, the supermarket manager. "You and this supermarket manager, organize the staff. Find some thick tape, nails, and boards to reinforce all the surrounding glass." "What? Why are you doing this?" someone asked in surprise. "Just do as you're told. I'm not sure what's in the thick fog, and I can't see anything. But anything in the fog can clearly see us through the glass, so blocking our line of sight is paramount," Locke said sternly. "So, move now, understand?" "Okay, all right, Agent." David and the others nodded. "Very good." Locke then looked at the woman with the flat head. "Mom, how far is your home from the supermarket?" If it were simply about saving his own life, Locke was confident. Ordinary people couldn't see through the thick fog, but Locke could sense the surroundings through magical perception. As for the monsters in the fog, several appeared in the storyline. The easiest to deal with were the poisonous scorpion flies and the skeleton bird. Ordinary people could handle them with a determined heart. Then there were the parasitic spiders, whose silk was corrosive and, like normal spiders, they stored food, preferring to lay eggs inside humans. Locke estimated these were the easiest to deal with. There were also more formidable monsters, such as the tentacle monster that had appeared in the warehouse behind the supermarket. Judging from the intensity, Locke could handle it. After all, he was well prepared, his dimensional space filled with various weapons and ammunition. The supermarket wouldn't be attacked by powerful monsters for a while, so Locke felt it was best to complete this mission while the danger was relatively low. "It's not far from the supermarket, less than 10 minutes away," the flat-headed woman said with some surprise. "If it were farther, I might not even bother leaving," Locke shrugged. "Now, let's get going. Lock the door until I get back. No one should open any doors or other exits." "Got it, but Agent, you can't just leave us here," someone said, watching Locke leave. "Don't worry, didn't this lady just say her house is very close? I'll be back in half an hour at most." Locke knew they were reluctant to lose their protection, and it was natural for them to panic, but he wouldn't let that delay his mission. The fog had only just arrived, and everyone was still maintaining their normal social order. He couldn't be too harsh in reprimanding them, as that would easily lead to rejection. Only when everyone panicked enough, even if a small number of disobedient individuals became involved, could Locke better grasp the situation. The mission required as many people as possible to survive, and to earn more potential points. Locke naturally sought to protect as many people as possible, even though this babysitting job was the most troublesome. "Let's go now," Locke said to the woman, pushing open the door. "You lead the way." He had the impression that the woman and her 2 children survived to the end, but Locke felt that if he hadn't made this trip, something might have happened. Chapter 160 Debate. The fog was thick, and visibility was low, only about 4 or 5 meters. The woman with the flat head said, struggling to find her way, "Thank you very much for your help. My name is Marjorie, keep your eyes on the road." "There could be unforeseen dangers around," Locke said. He could sense the woman's strong liking for him, but her appearance was so ordinary that he had no intention of making any comments. "It's just up ahead," just as Marjorie had said. Her home was close to the supermarket. He hadn't seen any monsters along the way, but Locke didn't let his guard down. Otherwise, why would those people scream? Locke speculated that the surrounding monsters had probably captured their prey and were still digesting it, allowing Marjorie to escape back home and hide. The 2 men reached the door when they heard a shrill scream from the side. Locke detected the situation through his magical senses. A person was running towards them, followed by a strange creature the size of a puppy, with 2 heads and strange horns. Locke frowned, as he noticed the person had multiple wounds on his body, making it difficult to treat. At that moment, the fleeing man approached. Seeing Locke, he cried out, "Help! Help me!" As he shouted, the monster behind him pounced and began to maul him. Bang! Locke fired 2 shots at the monster, one hitting each of its heads. Oh my god! Marjorie, who had just opened the door, screamed, "What the hell is this monster? Hurry and get your children." "Let's get out of here," Locke said gravely. This monster hadn't appeared in the movies before, which showed that there were many different kinds of monsters. After all, this was another dimension, so there must be a complete food chain. Marjorie quickly found the 2 children playing in the living room. They were too young to realize what the alarm meant, and they didn't hear the faint screams around them. These monsters look strange, but some of them could be dealt with by an ordinary person with a strong will. However, it was difficult for the average person to remain calm when suddenly confronted. Marjorie, crying, picked up the 2 children, leaving them confused as to what was happening. "Take them and leave now. Let's get back to the supermarket before the monsters arrive," Locke said gravely. "We still have a lot of food in the basement of our house. We can stay in there and wait for rescue," Marjorie said. Her house is the same as the common wooden houses in America, but because she is a single mother, the glass has been reinforced and anti-theft nets have been installed on the windows. The key is that the basement was carefully prepared by her. The door is a metal door, not an ordinary wooden door. If you hide in the basement, it is indeed safer than the supermarket. Locke looked at the basement and thought to himself that it was no wonder that they were able to hold on to the end in the plot. It is indeed safer here than the supermarket. If you really choose to do this, I will not stop you, but I will return to the supermarket. After all, there is a large group of people waiting for me there, Locke said. "Agent, can you stay too?" The other party grabbed Locke's hand and asked. "We can talk tonight." Locke twitched his mouth and didn't know how to complain in his heart. "Do you still want to seduce me when you look like this?" "Mom, we don't know what kind of monsters might be in the thick fog. I have to get back to the supermarket. You can stay here or follow me." Seeing Locke's unmoved expression, Marjorie hesitated for a moment, but ultimately picked up her younger son and held the older girl's hand. "Very good, you guys follow closely." Locke nodded, then jerked his gun up and fired a few more shots. The screams of monsters suddenly echoed through the thick fog. These were 2 of the same monsters, likely drawn in by the sound. With this in mind, Locke switched to a silencer. Locke speculated that the alternate dimension was filled with thick fog, so these monsters were more accustomed to hunting by hearing or touch. The fog had only just begun to spread, and most of the alien creatures hadn't yet reached the area. So, aside from killing 2 more parasitic spiders, the return trip was relatively safe. When Locke and the other 3 returned to the supermarket, David called out, "Hey, Agent, I heard something back there." Frowning, Locke approached the door leading to the back warehouse. "What happened?" "I just noticed something was wrong with the generator in the warehouse. After I turned it off, I heard the shutter door rattle, as if something was pushing against it," David said. "Good," Locke nodded, saying gravely, "Don't open the door. There might be an unknown monster outside." According to the original plot, the supermarket staff, disbelieving David, went to the warehouse and opened the shutter, only to have an unfortunate young man dragged out. Locke, through magical induction, also detected the monster, but rather than destroying it, the most important thing now was to calm the crowd in the supermarket. "Wait a minute, you're saying there's a monster behind the fog?" Norton, the black lawyer, leaned over and said, "You're definitely lying. This is just a rare weather phenomenon." "Really?" Locke stared at him. "Then what do you think about the unusual movements at the military base near town? And I just took out a few disgusting guys while I was out there. Perhaps Mrs. Marjorie can tell you what she saw. Of course, if you don't believe me, you can always go out and see for yourself. We just came back from the fog, so we should be able to prove it's not poisonous, right?" Norton was frightened by Locke's look, but he still didn't quite believe Locke's words. How could there be monsters in this world? Did these people take him for a fool? "Okay, Agent, what's going on?" An elderly woman approached. She was Ripla, the principal of the town's only elementary school, and everyone in town knew her. "Let Mrs. Marjorie tell you." Locke knew that to the townspeople, he was just an outsider, and Marjorie's words would be more credible. "There's a monster in the fog. I saw a man get tackled and eaten." Marjorie calmed down, then her next words shocked everyone. "How is that possible?" Everyone began to discuss. "Okay, everyone, listen to me." After a minute or two, allowing everyone to digest the news, Locke spoke up. "What did I say when I left? Why hasn't the glass wall changed at all?" While Locke speculated that these monsters didn't rely on vision, Applying tape and wooden boards could still be used to reinforce the wall. Most American houses are made of wood, and when repairs are needed, they go to the supermarket to buy some wood, so the supermarket certainly has a good stock of wood. At this point, Norton couldn't help but say, "That's enough. Even if there's danger, I think we should go to the police station for help. Not just listen to some FBI order that's not certain whether it's real or fake." "Anyone with me?" Norton speculated that it might be some wild boar or wolf, obscured by the thick fog, and Marjorie, frightened, had called it a monster. The town was a pleasant place, surrounded by mountains, water, and forests, so the sight of wolves or wild boars wasn't unusual. "I won't stop anyone from leaving with him, but please make a decision quickly," Locke said. "Of course, I won't go along with him and die, then you must know something. After all, the FBI wouldn't show up here for no reason," a town resident said. "What do you want to know?" Locke replied in a seemingly nonchalant tone. "The military base has existed in your town for so many years. There must be some secrets. After all, this isn't a strategic location. Do you think a simple agent like me is qualified to access such military secrets? Anyway, after seeing those monsters, I don't want to risk going out so far again." Chapter 161 Situation. Whatever their plans, most of the townspeople gave up their daring plans after hearing Locke's words. However, some soon set their sights on the 3 soldiers remaining at the supermarket. They were merely guarding the gates, completely unaware of the research within the base. From casual conversation, they knew something terrifying was being worked on, though they couldn't pinpoint the specifics. Thinking of the monsters Marjorie and Locke had described, everyone's thoughts turned to biological weapons. Damn it! Those damned politicians squander our taxpayers' money to create so many horrible things, everyone couldn't help but curse. "If you're trying to track those monsters with your voice, maybe make it louder," Locke suddenly said. After everyone calmed down, he continued, "On my way out just now, I encountered 3 waves of monsters. They're agile and difficult for ordinary people to deal with. So, let's think about fortifying the supermarket. So, what do we need to do next?" David, true to his role as the protagonist, was highly aware. He approached with several characters who played significant roles. Meanwhile, the eccentric Mrs. Carmody began to ramble on about the end of the world. She had mental issues, and people usually avoided her, but now her words had some resonance, given the current state of panic. Fortunately, Locke's presence gave everyone a sense of purpose. He then assigned tasks, primarily to reinforce the glass wall at the entrance. Drawing on his knowledge, Locke quickly designed a suitable reinforcement plan based on the available supplies. Doing something was always helpful, rather than just sitting back and waiting for death. As David worked, he asked Locke, "Agent, do you think this crisis was caused by the biological experiments being conducted at that military base?" "I can't be sure, it's just a possibility," Locke said. "You should have seen those military vehicles when you came here. They were all heading in the direction of the thick fog. Does this mean the military will be moving soon to resolve the problem?" David asked, a sudden thought coming to his mind. "Given such a serious problem, the Federation will surely send troops to resolve it," Locke nodded. "Great." Upon hearing this news, the people stopped cursing the Federation and instead wished it would move faster. In this situation, they could only rely on the Federation's army. "I estimate we can resolve this in 5 or 6 days, Locke's next words made everyone's heart sink. 5 or 6 days, David couldn't help but exclaim. Those monsters are everywhere now. 5 or 6 days is enough for them to massacre the town 3 times. A situation like this requires a massive military deployment, but do you think it's just a matter of a single order?" Locke said. "First, the report here needs to be submitted. Then those guys at the Pentagon need to review and discuss it. Once they've discussed and issued the order, it'll take time for the troops to be mobilized. And once the troops arrive, fighting in this thick fog, do you think they can be done in a day or 2? 5 or 6 days is already fast. This town is quite remote. Even if everyone in it died, it might be a good thing for the bigwigs in the White House. They could just say there's a plague or something. What a simple excuse." Everyone fell silent, their bodies icy cold. The deep malice in Locke's words chilled them to pulp. "Impossible. There are over 10,000 residents here. The Federation can't just leave so many of us alone," David exclaimed, in essence, trying to comfort himself. Of course, since they can't confirm the situation in the thick fog, They'll definitely send troops as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating and get it under control immediately. But that's only if we can hold out this long, Locke said slowly. At this point, the supermarket manager, Ollie, said to Locke, "Agent, since you're so calm, you should have a safe way to evacuate, right? If I leave the supermarket now and find a car to leave, with the skills I've honed over my years of professional experience, I still have a decent chance of escaping," Locke said slowly, "but I definitely can't take care of so many people here, so do you think it's best for me to stay here or leave?" The supermarket manager was speechless at this point. "Okay, once this place is reinforced, I'll patrol the area and confirm the monster situation. Anyone willing to come along can come and see if this is true." At this point, Locke glanced at Lawyer Norton. The look in his eyes told Locke that he wasn't completely convinced. David's thoughts raced, thinking that since the other party was willing to risk saving Lady Marjorie's 2 children, he must be kind. Furthermore, Locke's words had a hidden meaning. He could escape with a small group of people. If he could gain Locke's favor, perhaps he'd be able to take him and his son with him. Thinking of this, David said, "I'm willing to go on patrol with you." "Very good, you're a smart man. As long as the people here obey my orders, I'm sure some will be able to hold out until help arrives, only some. Protecting hostages is always the most difficult job. Look at them, you'll see that sometimes, incompetent teammates are more difficult to deal with than even godlike enemies." Locke pointed to the few people still arguing. Despite Locke's demonstrated ability, only a dozen or so people were willing to fully trust him. The others were mostly going along with the flow, and some were filled with doubt and anxiety. "Maybe we could find a sturdy building to hold our ground. This place is really unsafe," Ollie, the supermarket manager, suggested. In the plot, people want to escape because they've been cut off from the outside world and see no hope. But now that Locke has said the Federation will definitely send troops, everyone's desperate to find a safer place to hide. The supermarket's glass walls don't offer much of a sense of security. "I know, but I don't know where in town is safer. Plus, there are so many monsters out there. If we all go out together, there's bound to be casualties, and even most people might be in danger." The townspeople in the supermarket are concerned about Locke's reward, so he doesn't want to take any risks. Besides, the glass wall outside is broken, and there's still the warehouse behind. Locke can then have someone block the warehouse's metal door, and then he'll just have to hold the door leading to the supermarket. The supermarket even has an underground warehouse, but it's small, only able to accommodate a dozen people. However, if that situation really comes to that, the initiative will be gone, and he'll have to passively wait for rescue. In fact, if he encounters the giant monster that looms in the movies, hiding anywhere will be useless. A single kick will crush everyone here. It can only be said that this mission has limited Locke, or that Locke's strength is not yet at a level to be able to kill everyone. If he wanted to keep as many people alive as possible, he could only lead his men to passively defend here. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Locke would not choose to escape with a few people. Chapter 162, Once you get the weapons, you need to work. Regardless, the current situation was significantly better than in the plot. At least everyone had a sense of anticipation, and they were all working to reinforce the supermarket as Locke had instructed. Locke's insistence on saying 5 or 6 days, rather than 3, was actually to increase their resilience. Watching them work, Locke approached Ollie, the supermarket manager, and asked, "Where's the town's gun store? How far is it from here?" After all, this was Happy America, where shootings happened every day, and even an ordinary town couldn't be without a gun store. Locke had ample storage space for weapons, but it wouldn't be appropriate to show them in front of so many people, so he needed a plausible excuse. Of course, if the distance was really close, Locke could go check it out and bring some back in a car. After all, Locke had a deep fear of insufficient firepower. About 300 or 400 meters, Ollie's answer made Locke's eyes light up. "Very good. Draw me a route. I need to get some weapons." Locke waved the pistol in his hand. After all, this little thing might not be enough if needed. Ollie immediately found a notebook and drew a simple map of the gun store. He then asked, "Do you want someone to come with you?" "No need. I can do it alone," Locke said, and left the supermarket alone, walking into the thick fog. When he returned, he drove a car. He parked it in front of the supermarket and said to David and Ollie, "You guys get someone to move the stuff in. I'll be on guard." "Oh my goodness, you really brought back some good stuff." David opened the back door and looked at Locke's stacked guns. The more prepared, the better, Locke replied, using his magical senses to keep an eye on his surroundings. He actually brought back 2 M16s, 2 shotguns, and 6 Lolliks. He did bring back quite a bit of ammunition. Piling the guns on the front counter, Locke said, "Who here knows how to use them? It has to be someone with decent marksmanship." "Forget about poor marksmanship, I'm worried about accidental injuries." The townspeople exchanged glances. Ollie and David stepped forward, taking the pistols from Locke's hands. No one else followed. "Okay, you three," Locke said, turning to the 3 soldiers. Locke gave each of them a pistol and was about to hand over the M16s when someone suddenly said, "Wait a minute. They're the ones who caused this incident. Why are we giving them weapons?" Many people shared the same thought. Once someone spoke up, the others immediately chimed in. "Yes, they're the culprits. Why should we give them guns? Because I need help fighting now. These soldiers are at least trained. I can't take care of so many of you on my own." Locke expressionlessly handed each of the 5 men 2 more magazines and said, "They're just ordinary soldiers. Can they influence the decisions of those bigwigs?" Although everyone knew what Locke said was right, some couldn't help but feel unhappy, even cursing. Such is human nature. "Give me a gun too," someone said. "Can you shoot?" "Of course, I'm a good shot." The man hesitated, then shouted. "Haha," Locke slapped his hand away, "I can smell the milk on you, so stop lying. I'm a professional." "That's not fair." "Why?" The man had just said half of his sentence when he felt something cold stuffed into his mouth. Locke pointed the muzzle of a gun at his mouth and said, "I won't give a gun to troublemakers. You are just that kind of person. Do you understand?" With his mouth blocked by the muzzle of the gun, the man dared not say a word. He could only look at Locke with pleading eyes. He slowly put the gun back, wiped it on his clothes, and said while fiddling with other guns, "Whoever gets the robbery, come with me to the pharmacy next door. We need to deal with the monster there." "What?" Everyone looked at him in shock. David even dropped the gun in his hand. "Just now, while I was outside, I took a look around and noticed a nest of monster spiders in the pharmacy next door. The smaller ones are as big as wash basins. They've built a nest right next to us," Locke said as he sorted his gun. "In 2 days, these spiders will multiply rapidly and start looking for food. What do you think will happen to those newly born spider monsters, desperate for food, when they suddenly find so much food so close to home in a supermarket? Maybe before the Federation can rescue them, everyone here will become food for those newly hatched spiders." The parasitic spiders in the story are roughly the same combat effectiveness as the skeleton birds that stormed the supermarket. A single person with the right weapon can handle them, making them low on the food chain. However, they excel at concealment and concealment. Their silk is highly corrosive and toxic, allowing the spitterlings to sneak into the supermarket through ventilation ducts and cracks. Locke doesn't want to wait a day or 2 to rush around fixing leaks. After gathering his weapons, Locke returned to the supermarket shelves and began making simple incendiary bombs. The only way to completely eliminate the spiders next door was to burn the pharmacy down. "Okay, we got it. So what are we going to do?" asked Ollie, the supermarket manager. "I'll make a few simple incendiary bombs and flamethrowers. Just follow me and drop the incendiary bombs at the right places. If we encounter any monsters, I'll take care of them." Ultimately, the fog was a constraint. Maintaining order with such a large group was difficult, otherwise, Locke might have simply left with them in a convoy. The price of greater rewards came with greater effort. "Okay, Ollie, you stay in the supermarket. Keep an eye on the guns and ammunition here. Don't let anyone take them. And organize the people to continue fortifying the supermarket." "Okay, I understand," Ollie nodded hurriedly, realizing he didn't need to go out to help, and placed the remaining M16 and shotgun beside him. Locke gave Ollie his assignment, then looked at David, who had picked up his gun again, and the 3 soldiers. He handed them a few incendiary bombs and explained how to use them. At this time, no one mentioned that these soldiers should not be given weapons. After all, having weapons means that they need to go out and take risks to work, and no one is willing to do that. And these 3 soldiers are being collectively excluded by the townspeople. If they dare to say no, they will probably be overwhelmed by the angry townspeople. They can only choose to follow Locke. "Wait a minute," at this time, the black lawyer Norton suddenly said, "I will go with you. I still can't believe that there are monsters in the thick fog. I want to go with you to see." Very courageous, Locke glanced at Norton, who was still skeptical in his heart. I hope that when you encounter monsters later, you will not be so weak that you forget to run away, otherwise I won't have the time to carry you on my back." Locke handed a pistol to Norton and said, "This is for your self-defense. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 163 Dark Night. Led by Locke, the group emerged from the supermarket and cautiously made their way to the pharmacy next door. Visibility was low in the thick fog, but the pharmacy was right next door, and they quickly reached its entrance. "Damn. They didn't even close the door," David muttered, then saw the interior filled with white, silky spider webs. "This is a spider's nest," Norton's face littered with emotion. He no longer suspected a prank, especially after seeing the 3 human-shaped cocoons hanging on the wall. "Get all the incendiary bombs and throw them around," Locke ordered. "Burn this place down completely, but those 3 people are still alive, right?" David asked cautiously. "The parasitic spiders have laid eggs in their bodies," Locke said coldly. "This isn't a hospital, and we don't have any surgeons. Saving them would just leave them to die. Of course, if you want to save them, you can go in and try. But if you alert the monster, don't blame me for not warning you, okay?" David hesitated, then finally nodded. "No need to go too deep, just burn the area in front of us. If we disperse too far into the pharmacy, we might be ambushed." David, Norton, and 3 other soldiers obediently pulled out incendiary bombs and threw them around. Just then, a parasitic spider, as big as a tire, suddenly leaped from the ceiling. It smothered at the crowd standing at the door, and a piercing cry erupted. Bang! Before anyone could react, Locke raised his hand and struck the spider's head, sending the acid splattering all around. Wow! Several people jumped in shock. Some stared at the parasitic spider's corpse in shock, then slowly relaxed as they looked at the burning pharmacy. The spiders here reminded Locke of the giant spiders he had encountered in Prosperity Town. The monsters in the fog were terrifying to ordinary people, much larger than creatures on Earth. But they clearly had no extraordinary abilities. If this were the case, the Federation of this world might actually have a chance of colonizing another dimension. After all, simply being larger would likely make them targets against a modern, organized military. Locke, lost in thought, tossed an incendiary grenade deep into the area. The flames spread rapidly along the white spider silk, and the faint cries of many spiders could be heard. They must have just hatched. Fortunately, their numbers weren't too large. If they waited a few more days, the spiders here would have swarmed and become difficult to deal with. For now, as long as they were careful and checked for any gaps, they could ensure these spiders wouldn't pose too much of a threat. Gazing at the blazing pharmacy before them, several people couldn't help but scream in joy. After so much fear, they finally needed to let off some steam. Bang, bang, bang. Locke suddenly raised his M16 and rapidly pulled the trigger in a direction in the mist. Before they could react, they heard the roar of a massive monster. "Get out of the way," Locke kicked David, who was standing next to him. Its 3-meter long, sickle-like forelimbs slashed through the air, brushing past David's body. Only then did several people see the massive monster. It resembled a giant mantis, its body over 10 meters long and its forelimbs over 3 meters long, sending everyone screaming in terror. Bang, bang, bang. Locke calmly aimed his shotgun at the monster's head, leaving a trail of holes in it. Hiss! The monster roared in anger. The shotgun's power was clearly insufficient to deal with it. It only seemed to shatter a few pieces of flesh from its face. Seeing this, Locke pulled an M79 grenade launcher from his storage compartment, flipped the safety, aimed it at the monster's head, and pulled the trigger. Bang! A violent explosion erupted, instantly ripping the mantis's skull apart. Bang! Still feeling unsafe, Locke fired another grenade at the mantis, completely shattering its skull. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. What the FK? Several people cursed at the sudden appearance of the giant mantis. Locke couldn't help but frown. In the show, these giant creatures were mostly fleeting. That tentacle monster, whose size was unknown, simply devoured a hapless store clerk and vanished. This was likely due to the production's budget constraints, but in the real world, these threats were very real. Alright, let's get back to the supermarket, Locke urged, thinking to himself. Hearing Locke's words, the frightened people finally came to their senses. Their earlier exclamations of excitement vanished, and they hurried back to the supermarket. "Oh my God, Agent, you're amazing. You actually took down such a massive monster." Once they were safely back at the supermarket, a soldier who had followed them out regained consciousness and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, gesturing with his hands as if to describe the size of the giant mantis. The others also began to discuss the situation. For the few who had gone out together, Locke's performance had given them a great sense of security. As the sky gradually darkened, everyone gathered in groups to discuss what would happen tomorrow when suddenly a snapping sound came from outside the window. It wasn't the sound of someone searching for human origins, but rather the crash of something hitting the supermarket's glass wall. Oh my God, the lower half of the supermarket's glass wall had been built into a 1.5-meter-high wall made of rice and flour bags. The upper half and the main door had been reinforced and sealed with nails, tape, and wooden boards, but one could still see through the cracks a dense swarm of poisonous scorpions and flying insects outside. Locke had long since discovered through his magical perception that these creatures were everywhere outside, like mosquitoes in summer, appearing as soon as night fell. But compared to mosquitoes, these palm-sized creatures were far more lethal, carrying a toxin that was almost certain to kill anyone who bit them. Strictly speaking, Locke would rather deal with 3 or 5 giant mantis monsters than a swarm of poisonous scorpions and flying insects. "Are all these monsters like these out there?" Black Lawyer Norton broke into cold sweat. "What do you think?" Locke asked, then addressed the people huddled in the cracks. "Everyone, put out your candles now, and don't make any loud noises." Both light and sound might attract the monster's attention. The power had gone out, and the supermarket's generator was too loud. Locke had already had it turned off, and the remaining batteries wouldn't last long, so everyone was burning candles. With a day's experience, Locke's prestige had gradually grown. Hearing his words, people began to extinguish their candles and gather together, daring not to speak loudly, simply listening to noises outside and praying for nothing to happen. Of course, many people were whispering among themselves. But Locke heard it but didn't intervene. Complete silence at this moment would only exacerbate the fear within. He was also a little worried. Although the glass wall was reinforced with wooden boards, these boards were less strong than reinforced glass, and were mostly held together with tape and glue. Even if this protection kept out the scorpions and flies, it might not remain intact if it attracted the attention of the larger skeleton birds. Chapter 164 The atmosphere becomes relaxed. Aside from the hushed whispers and the occasional thud of poisonous scorpions and flies hitting the glass walls, the supermarket was utterly silent. But then, a voice rang out. Locusts emerged from the smoke, and the Lord gave them the power of scorpions. Mrs. Carmody, having unceremoniously produced a scented candle, muttered to herself, cradling it in her hands. "Shut up," Locke approached, ripping a piece of tape over her mouth. Then, in a deep voice, he declared, "If I hear you babbling again, I'll use my treasure to bore a hole through your head." Feeling the cool touch of the pistol silencer against her temple, Mrs. Carmody dared not move. Seeing she had finally quieted down, Locke returned to his seat. This woman was like a toad. She wouldn't bite, but she still made Locke nauseous. "Great. You finally shut her up," Amanda whispered into Locke's ear. Locke shrugged, glancing at the woman, who was almost pressing against him. He knew she was instinctively seeking a sense of security. Ms. Amanda wasn't the first to do this. Several women had tried to strike up a conversation before, but Locke had rejected them all. This woman was decent looking, and with some careful grooming, she could still achieve a passing aesthetic. Locke didn't push her away. While he had no real plans, it was a good way to pass the time. "Do your missions often involve danger?" Noticing that Locke didn't refuse, Ms. Amanda seemed encouraged. She ignored Locke's outstretched hand, ready to throw herself at him. Bang! Just then, a violent crash against the glass wall sent everyone's heart pounding. Locke knew it was a skeleton bird, which often feeds on poisonous scorpions and flies. Fortunately, it seemed to have accidentally hit the glass wall, and there were no more noises after that. Through his magical senses, Locke could sense what was happening outside. The skeleton bird had swooped down from the air, swallowed the poisonous scorpion and fly, and then crashed into the glass wall. The skeleton bird's beak was quite strong, and after the impact, it fell to the ground, swayed slightly, and then stood up again, fluttering its wings a few times and flew away again. It seems that years of adaptation to the environment have enabled these skeleton birds to develop the strength to withstand collisions with hard objects without sustaining injury. However, this impact has already left cracks on the reinforced glass wall. In the plot, these creatures broke through the glass wall on the first night, causing considerable chaos. It seems that having people extinguish candles and keep their voices down did have some effect. At least it didn't attract the attention of the scorpions and flying insects, greatly reducing the chances of the skeleton birds breaking through the glass wall. The long night finally passed. Thanks to Locke's efforts, the supermarket's glass wall was not breached on the first night, but communication with the outside world remained impossible. It seemed that the thick fog had the ability to block signals. The supermarket was much quieter during the day. Locke assigned Ollie and David to direct the staff to organize the warehouse in the back and seal any possible breaches as a second line of defense. He himself perused an ancient thread-bound book from the East. It was a book on the human meridians, which Locke was currently studying. Although modern anatomy has not yet confirmed the existence of the so-called acupoints and meridians in traditional Chinese medicine, their functions are real. Otherwise, where would acupuncture treatment come from? Even the concepts of internal energy in martial arts novels are based on meridians and acupoints. Since this world possesses supernatural powers like magic, surely something could be discovered through their study. Locke's idea was to study the meridians and acupoints, using magical energy to stimulate and strengthen them, to see what the effects would be. He had actually conducted some experiments on his own, paying homeless people to perform covert experiments on them, and had already achieved some results. Locke had discovered a complete meridian and acupoint circulation system, and if magical energy were continuously circulated through it, it would have a strengthening effect on the human body. This method was even more effective than Locke's usual meditation, where magical energy flowed through the body, passively strengthening the body. So now, when Locke meditated, in addition to concentrating magical energy in his sea of consciousness, he also consciously controlled the circulation of magical energy through his meridians and acupoints. Because of this discovery, Locke was considering when to visit the East Country to see if he could gather more useful information. After everyone had rested up after a poor night's sleep, Locke and his men inspected the glass wall and discovered cracks in several places, which made him worry about the night ahead. After some consideration, he simply led his men to reinforce the cracked glass on the other side of the glass wall with a few remaining wooden boards and adhesive tape. During this time, they also killed 14 or 15 of those two-headed dog-like monsters and a giant centipede lying on the ground, more than a man's height and over 10 meters long. These were monsters Locke had never seen in the movies. The appearance of the giant mantis and the centipede made Locke realize that the danger here was greater than in the movies, but they posed no threat to him personally. In other words, aside from the oversized monster that loomed in the movie, the other monsters posed little threat to Locke. No wonder the base reward was only 800 potential points, not much different from taking out the Cordes family. The next night, aside from the regular noises of the poisonous scorpions, flies, and skeleton birds, the supermarket was quiet. Everyone had grown accustomed to these noises and gradually calmed down. But when daybreak arrived, Locke discovered that the outer layer of wooden reinforcement had cracked in several places. It looked like the glass wall wouldn't be any better, and he knew his final night would be a tough one. The supermarket had run out of planks. Thinking of this, Locke returned to the store and reorganized the evening schedule, having the women, elderly, and children rest in the warehouse at the back, while the rest of the able-bodied remained outside. After all, there were over 100 or 200 people in the store, and the warehouse couldn't accommodate them all. Lee, thank you so much for this. Without you, we really wouldn't know how we'd handle those monsters. Want some beer? David asked Locke with a smile. The supermarket naturally had plenty of food, more than enough for the people here for a month or two. After 2 days of safe passage, especially after Locke dispatched a giant mantis and then easily dispatched a giant centipede, everyone's mood gradually brightened, anticipating that federal aid would arrive in 2 or 3 days. Furthermore, the black lawyer, Norton, had said that once the crisis was over, he could sue the federal government on behalf of the town, guaranteeing everyone an astronomical amount of compensation. This further boosted everyone's morale. If the crisis hadn't been resolved, they might have been planning a party to celebrate. Even David couldn't help but feel a small thrill at the thought of living off the compensation in a few days. His wife, who had likely died at home, couldn't contain her excitement either. It might seem inhumane, but it actually aligns with the sentiment of most free-spirited Americans: the dead are gone, so it's more important to cherish the present. That's right, Lee. Cheer up a bit, don't be so serious all the time, said Ollie, the supermarket manager, handing Locke a beer. He was only the supermarket manager, not the owner, so he naturally didn't care about the owner's losses, not to mention whether he was even alive. I'm just worried there might be trouble tonight, Locke said, gazing at the glass wall. Just in case, I've got a few cars outside the supermarket. If anything goes wrong, we can try to get away. No, you've been in the FBI for so long that you tend to overthink things, David patted Locke on the shoulder. I hope so, Locke said, his intuition telling him that the coming night and the final morning would be tough. Chapter 165 Outrageous. The third night arrived as expected. That night, the sounds of scorpions, flies, and skeleton birds pounding against the glass walls intensified, and Locke felt as if they were multiplying. The people inside the supermarket couldn't see what was happening outside, but the pounding, far more frequent than the previous 2 days, made everyone's faces grim. The scorpions and flies were a minor concern, but the pounding of the skeleton birds was the most resonant. Even within the quiet supermarket, the faint crack of glass could be heard. Locke knew this was his last night. He had to be constantly vigilant at night, so he only occasionally wandered around during the day to kill monsters. If he could rescue the people inside the supermarket, Locke was confident he would receive a generous reward. As time passed, someone noticed bulges forming in several areas of the reinforced wood paneling, and Locke knew his fears had been realized. Finally, amidst the worried expressions of the crowd, the reinforced glass and wood paneling shattered, and a strange head emerged from the hole. Locke immediately recognized it as the skeleton bird from the movie. "Biu?" He raised his hand and blew the creature's head off with a single shot. Some still couldn't help but scream, and Locke hurried to quiet them down. Apparently, the commotion still attracted the attention of the surrounding monsters, and the collisions intensified. Besides this spot, holes began to appear in 2 other places, revealing the skulls of skeleton birds. In the panic, David and the others momentarily forgot to fire. The creature, about the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child, was stuck in the hole, its wings flapping continuously. Fortunately, the others didn't fire. In fact, Locke was worried that random shots would further damage the glass facade, so he aimed his own bullets at the other skeleton bird. With Locke's skill, every shot was sure to hit the bird's head while ensuring no damage to the glass. Seeing 2 skeleton birds destroyed by Locke in quick succession, the people here had no time to rejoice when they saw several flying insects flying in through the holes. Fortunately, Locke reacted quickly, throwing out a few nails, nailing the poisonous scorpion flies one by one. "Everyone, be careful. These monsters are extremely poisonous," Locke warned, setting everyone on edge. Now, Locke was thankful he'd had the glass walls reinforced long beforehand, otherwise there would have been a problem yesterday, forcing them to retreat to the warehouse tonight. Originally, the attack had only occurred once on the first night, but that wasn't going to happen. They wouldn't stop all night. Well, he'd been busy all night. Given Locke's physique, nothing would have happened, but he was exhausted. All night, he'd been busy hacking away at the skeleton birds that smashed through the glass and wood, or destroying the venomous scorpions and flies that flew in, then directing the others to makeshift plugs with random objects. Fortunately, after the initial panic, the others realized these monsters weren't as terrifying and invincible as they'd imagined. Naturally, there were some casualties, including 2 lives lost, and Locke had killed a total of 13 skeleton birds. 40 or 50 venomous scorpions and flies had also flown into the supermarket, their bodies dumped outside after daybreak. With only 4 or 5 hours remaining, the mission would be complete by noon. And the reward imminent. Locke, far from relaxing, tensed up even more. Today is already the 3rd day. Federal rescue will arrive in 2 or 3 days at most. Looking at the 2 fallen, Locke offered encouragement. "If things don't work out, we can hide in the warehouse out back at night. We can always hold on." Locke then turned to David, Norton, and Ollie. The 3 of them understood his message and offered a heartwarming lecture, finally helping everyone move on from the trauma of their lives. After everyone had recovered and rested for a moment, Locke frowned and called over 3 soldiers and 3 others. "Come with me to the front of the supermarket and check. I have a feeling something's amiss." None of the others said anything. They had previously accompanied Locke outside to reinforce the glass wall, where they had dispatched even the massive giant mantis and centipede, without losing a single life. With 6 men gathering their weapons, Locke led the way outside the supermarket. Moments later, 2 massive figures emerged from the mist. Sure enough, they're here. I didn't expect 2 predators like giant mantises to appear at once. Could they be a male and a female? He muttered inwardly, raising his grenade launcher. He had already detected the approach of the 2 giant mantises through his magical senses, which was why he had brought his men out to investigate. If one of them truly arrived to wreak havoc in the supermarket, its massive claws could completely destroy the glass walls in a single blow. Meanwhile, the other 6 men were stunned upon seeing the giant mantises. Already terrified, they abandoned all else and ran screaming towards the supermarket. I can't count on them, but at least they've managed to attract attention, Locke said, pulling the trigger on his grenade launcher. Boom! A violent explosion echoed as the grenade exploded on the head of a giant mantis. Locke jumped back, and a massive claw landed on the ground in front of him, but its owner was already dead. At the same time, another giant mantis monster clamped down on a soldier who had abandoned his gun and fled in panic, slicing him in 2 at the waist. A large amount of blood splattered out, creating a bloody scene. But the next moment, Locke's M79 grenade launcher was reloaded, and with a roar of explosion, the giant mantis monster followed its companion's footsteps. The giant mantis monster fell, crushing several cars, but Locke didn't feel relieved at all. Instead, he looked into the distance with a hint of surprise. Everyone, hide in the supermarket and don't come out again. The big monster is coming. I'll distract it. Locke returned to the supermarket entrance and gave instructions. What the hell? Boom! David was about to ask when a thunderous vibration echoed in the distance. The supermarket began to shake as if it had been struck by an earthquake. Looking at the giant monster in the distance, a part of it was vaguely visible. Locke's eyes flashed with a fierce look. This is outrageous. He didn't expect that the top-level monster that only appeared in the background in movies and TV shows would actually come this way. Wasn't this a deliberate trick? As he thought about this, Locke sensed through magic that a house over 200 meters away had been trampled into flattened ruin like a can. Although the monster was not agile, it only took a few steps to reach this side. Chapter 166 Richard Crawford's Research. It's dozens of meters tall, like a giant. We can't let it go any further. Realizing the massive boss's path would undoubtedly pass through the supermarket, Locke couldn't help but frown. Taking advantage of the dense fog, he quickly moved over 100 meters away. Bang, bang, bang. A series of gunshots sent the surrounding monsters, startled by Locke, falling to the ground. Locke then pulled out a rocket launcher and aimed at the distant boss. Swish! The rocket quickly locked onto its target, striking with a trail of flame. Roar! A roar of intense anger echoed. The boss resembled a goat, its massive head sporting 4 eyes, long horns, and 6 legs, each of its legs roughly the size of 2 buses parked side by side. Every movement it made caused devastating damage to those nearby, and its senses seemed unaffected by the fog. Sensing Locke as the cause of its suffering, it shifted direction and advanced towards him. Bang! 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 The enormous goat charged towards Locke, forcing him to run at top speed, guiding him until they were 3 or 4 kilometers away. Suddenly, the ring on his hand flashed. Swish! Locke's figure appeared above the goat's head, blinding the creature's 4 eyes. Furious, the massive goat began to stomp on everything around it, each footfall causing intense damage and vibrations in the surrounding area. While its size made its movement seem slow, its sheer size meant it could cover distances of dozens of meters, making escape impossible for ordinary humans. With such a massive size, it would be considered a minor monster in the Ultraman series. It was unknown what kind of environment could support such a creature at the top of the food chain. Locke had to run at full speed to keep the goat in his sight. All the monsters around the goat fled, while Locke, perched on its head, seemed to be strolling leisurely. Checking the time, he saw he still had over an hour to return. Locke also noticed what was happening a few kilometers away. The vanguard, centered around several tanks and armored vehicles, was clearing out the surrounding monsters. Artillery and RPG fire were unleashed, a typical American practice. First, a saturation fire plowed through the area, then the soldiers moved in to mop up the rear. After all, these were just ordinary giant creatures, devoid of any special abilities. If a fully equipped army couldn't handle them, it would be a joke. For example, a few hundred meters ahead, a monster over 10 meters tall, resembling an ostrich, was brought down by a few tank shells, instantly ascending to heaven. Meanwhile, The American forces seemed to have spotted the giant goat as well. Sensing the roar of incoming artillery fire, Locke quickly activated his disappearance ability twice, reaching a distance of 700 or 800 meters before returning to the goat monster. The goat demon, smitten by the barrage, roared in anger again, temporarily drowning out the roar of the artillery fire. The goat monster's skeletal outer shell was indeed remarkably tough. Locke could see that ordinary tank fire had little effect, just like his earlier rockets, only causing it pain. As if finding a target to vent its hatred, the enraged goat monster charged headlong towards the vanguard. Seeing a small hill bearing down on it, it barely managed to launch another attack, only to be overtaken by the giant goat monster. Its terrifying mass crushed several tanks and armored vehicles, flattening the ground. However, the U.S. military's most formidable firepower wasn't limited to the Army's vanguard. Receiving the distress signal, the Air Force quickly locked onto the massive goat monster. They unleashed 2 of the latest heavy missiles, each capable of destroying anything within a few hundred meters. A sharp explosion echoed, and Locke watched as the goat monster's incredibly hard bony shell instantly shattered, its mountain-like mass engulfed in intense flames. After staggering for a while, the goat monster finally collapsed with a thud, crashing onto a large section of houses. Locke breathed a sigh of relief. He checked the time, only about an hour had passed. He quickly returned to the supermarket, where he was surrounded by a swarm of people, questioning him profusely. Locke simply remarked that he had seen an oversized monster running in one direction, and said nothing more. After waiting in the supermarket for a while, he received a notification that his mission was complete. According to the system, he could remain in the store for up to 3 months, after which he would be forcibly repatriated. He chose not to stay longer, instead returning to the American TV world and reappearing in his room at the manor on Kensington Gardens Avenue. Only then did Locke feel like examining his gains. A whopping 4,780 potential points made him laugh. This was the first time he had ever received such a large reward from a mission. Thinking his 3 days of babysitting had paid off, Locke rushed to the bathroom to wash up. He still felt a bit strange after not showering for 3 days. After showering, he checked the time. It was already early morning, so he decided to take a nap. 3 days of constant tension and constant magical induction had taken a toll on Locke. He slept until 9 in the morning, when the manor maid informed him that Laura had called. "What's wrong? What's the matter that required me to come here?" Locke asked Laura upon arriving at Crawford Manor. "Come with me." Laura dragged Locke to the villa's study and showed him some books on the desk. "I've been researching legends about Queen Himiko these past few days. I discovered many of them were found by my parents, including my father's research notes. Look here." Laura pointed to some records in the research. According to records, Himiko was the queen of Yamate-koku during the Yayoi period in Japan. She became queen at the age of 17. Then, a great war broke out in Japan, with lords from various regions fighting each other, and eventually, they jointly recognized Himiko as king. There are also records in Eastern history that she once paid tribute to then Eastern emperor and received rewards. The records say that she practiced ghost magic and was able to deceive the people. She was already grown up, without a husband, and had a male brother who assisted in governing the country. Since she became king, she has rarely been seen. Japanese records of this queen are more like myths and legends, describing her as a sorceress with powerful magical powers, able to control natural forces, exorcise demons, and possess the ability to reincarnate. Legend has it that Queen Himiko reincarnated many times, but once, at the end of her life, she never reborn. After this, Yamate was ravaged by incessant winds, and the island was frequently hit by torrential rain, lightning, and icy snow. Even now, an area near Yamate is perpetually shrouded in strong winds, ripping any approaching ships to pieces by storms and tsunamis. Many locals call it the Devil's Dragon Triangle. After Locke finished reading, Laura said, "This record is outrageous. How could witches exist in this world? Did you hear what my father said? Why would he write that in his research notes? It's completely unscientific." Chapter 167, A Bit Cruel Mouth. Putting down the notes, Locke glanced at her and said casually, "Current mainstream scientific research has indeed not discovered the existence of real witches and magic. However, some things may have been considered magic in ancient times. For example, people used to worship thunder and lightning, and now its principles have been explained by science, Are you saying that Himiko used some natural phenomena or scientific principles to disguise herself as a powerful witch? Laura asked. This is my speculation, based on my background as a scientist, Locke said seriously. In American dictionaries, occultism is defined as the study of the supernatural. Almost every civilization has its own myths and legends. Occultism has always evolved and faded. Early occultism was closely tied to religion, such as alchemy, which was later discovered to be chemistry. Theology once claimed that the human body couldn't circulate, but with the development of modern medicine, this claim has been disproven. Ancient occultists often mastered techniques unknown to their time, and through mysterious packaging, they were regarded as representatives of the gods. In my opinion, occultism and science are unified. Science is an ever-evolving discipline. We've now deciphered many of the mystical mysteries of the past. Similarly, the forces we now consider unknown and mysterious may very well be deciphered by science in the future. You're right, Laura nodded, agreeing with Locke's assessment. Looking at Laura, who had been completely deceived by him, Locke wondered what she would think when she witnessed true magical power and recalled his words. Unfortunately, this is all I've found from my father's research. There's no mention of Queen Himiko's tomb, Laura continued. Have you found anything? I just contacted a private investigator to go to Japan to investigate. If your parents really go looking for Queen Himiko's tomb, they'll definitely come into contact with local people, Locke said slowly. I'll definitely let you know if there's any relevant information. Okay, Laura nodded. I'll look through the things my parents left behind and see if I can find any more clues. As she spoke, Laura stood up from her seat and picked up her notebook, but something unexpected happened. Laura's foot twisted, and the notebook flew out of her hand, scattering the papers between them. Locke instinctively reached out to catch the notebook and the scattered papers, but then he noticed Laura's eyes moving in sync with his movements. This surprised Locke immensely, because the speed he unintentionally used was far beyond the reach of ordinary people, yet Laura's eyes moved in response, indicating that she had at least seen something. Next, at the moment when Locke was stunned, Laura steadily caught the notes. Locke, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Laura stared at the paper in Locke's hand and the notes in her own, stunned. How did you do that? I have quick reflexes, Locke explained, casually handing the paper to Laura. He looked at her and said, your reflexes are pretty good too. Have you always been like this since you were a child? Huh? Laura asked, somewhat puzzled. Really? Aren't you faster than me? I only saw you grabbing the papers, but I couldn't fully see your movements. Didn't you catch the notes too? Locke raised an eyebrow, noting Laura's expression, and asked again, did you always do that? Isn't it normal to be able to catch one? Laura was a little confused. It's a subconscious reaction. When I was a kid, I watched circuses and learned to play catch. But after trying for an entire afternoon, I could only catch 4 balls at most. It was nothing compared to the performers who could catch 5, 6, or even 7 or 8 balls at a time. I thought it was so difficult. So that's how it is, Locke said with a smile. Would you like to play a game with me? It's very interesting. What game? Laura looked interested. You have a kitchen here, right? Locke asked. Of course, follow me. Laura led Locke to the Manor's kitchen. Here you go. Locke and Laura stood facing each other, and he handed her a fruit knife. What's this for? Look at me. Don't look at anything else. Now try to play catch. Toss this fruit knife into the air and catch it, Locke said. While this might seem a bit dangerous and could easily injure her, Locke was right there, so it wouldn't be a problem. Then Laura watched him, tossing the fruit knife up, and then, as it spun and fell, she caught it firmly. Her movements were clearly unskilled. Locke had been watching Laura's eyes. As the fruit knife fell, she genuinely didn't look, yet she caught the handle firmly, without any effort. Then let's move on to the next step, Locke said. Okay, despite the danger, Laura felt a strange excitement, her heart racing, and a surge of anticipation. Very good, let's get started, Locke said as he took the fruit knife from Laura's hand and threw it upwards without even looking at it. He just looked at Laura's eyes. The fruit knife was spinning around the two people's heads. Laura's hair stood on end. After a pause, she instinctively turned her eyes away from Locke and raised her head slightly to look at the fruit knife. Locke was paying attention to Laura's every move. She saw that her eyes turned away almost at the moment the fruit knife fell. This reaction speed might not be as fast as his, but it was far beyond that of ordinary people. This reaction speed was something that ordinary people could not achieve no matter what. Then Laura caught the handle of the fruit knife before it cut across her cheek. "Great," Locke laughed and applauded. "Ah," Laura screamed in surprise, and then looked at the fruit knife in a daze. "You're truly gifted. Your reaction speed is far superior to that of ordinary people," Locke exclaimed. No wonder she could become the future goddess of destruction and escape death so many times. This talent was truly remarkable. Even Mindy needed years of training to achieve it. But Laura clearly hadn't received any professional training. "Come on, Laura," as if Locke had opened the door to a new world, continued to play the knife-throwing and catching game. "This stage is about right." Locke watched her play for a while, then smiled and said, "I think we can try to take it a step further." "A step further?" Laura's eyes lit up with a strange excitement. Locke had considered throwing the fruit knife at Laura, but felt that would set a bad precedent. Instead, he found a tablecloth to wrap the fruit knife, blocking the blade. He calculated the speed and threw it at Laura. "Wow," Laura exclaimed, reaching out to catch the fruit knife as it flew past her with a stunning performance. Looking at the fruit knife in her hand, Laura smiled. "This is so exciting. It's interesting, isn't it?" Locke said with a smile. "You can do it too." Laura suddenly thought of something and looked at Locke. "Of course," Locke nodded with a smile. "Watch this," Laura suddenly shouted and threw the fruit knife in her hand at Locke. There was no need to follow the trajectory. The moment Laura threw the fruit knife, Locke had already calculated the speed of the fruit knife, stretched out 2 fingers, and clamped the fruit knife. "Wow, you are so good," Laura smiled and clapped her hands. Come on, come on." So the two of them started playing the game of throwing fruit knives at each other. After a while, after she got used to it, she became a little dissatisfied with this kind of excitement. "Let's take off the tablecloth," Laura suggested. "No, you're not even close," Locke shook his head. "It would be bad if you hurt yourself." "Come on," Laura said coquettishly. "Just give it a try, okay? You know I'm quick. Why don't we test it out?" Seeing Laura start to drift, he decided to give her a cold shoulder. "Stretch out your hand." "Okay." Laura confidently held out her hand. Locke, wrapped in a fruit knife, said to Laura, "I'll hit you, you dodge." "No problem." Laura knew the game well. She'd played it with her classmates at school before, always winning. No one wanted to play against her. But then she screamed. She'd tried to dodge, and thought she had, but in reality, she felt pain in her palm. "Now you know you're still far from it," Locke teased with a smile. "No, try again." "I don't believe I can't dodge." Laura pouted and held out her hand again. Ah, wow, the result was a series of painful sensations in her palm. She looked at Locke's smile, feeling increasingly unconvinced, and couldn't help but rush towards him. Locke was slightly stunned. Seeing Laura's expression, he knew that he had gone too far, so he didn't dodge. He watched Laura rush over and jump, wrapping her legs around Locke's waist, opening her mouth and biting Locke's shoulder. Feeling the pain on his shoulder, Locke raised an eyebrow. "This little girl is a bit cruel." Chapter 168, I Was Once a Pure Person. After a while, Laura's bite weakened, and as if sensing a sense of indignation, she looked up at Locke. Bang! Locke flicked her forehead and said, "Has your madness reached a limit? Get off." HMPH, Laura pouted, then realized their actions were becoming somewhat intimate. She couldn't help but blush and dismounted from Locke, not daring to meet his gaze. Following Locke's advice, Laura began learning martial arts. With her incredible talent and the personal guidance of Locke, a master of martial arts, she quickly mastered the art. Unfortunately, Locke's time in London was running out. After about 10 days, he said goodbye to Laura and began flying back and forth across Europe. His main mission was to inspect the properties he had recently acquired, meet with managers, review accounts, and gain a first-hand understanding of their operations. During this process, Locke uncovered numerous underhanded operations and fired 39 senior executives from various businesses, suing 7 of them. By the time everything was sorted out and he returned to New York, it was already the end of January 1993. Central Perk Cafe. After returning to New York and resting for 2 days, Locke arrived. Seeing Monica and Chandler chatting, he joined him. "Hi, Locke, long time no see," Chandler greeted. "Something to attend to in England," Locke explained with a smile. "Going to England again? Is it another academic exchange this time?" Monica asked. "Some business matters," Locke said briefly. "I see. Speaking of which, your university is quite astonishing," Monica sighed. "Alice, Tang Wei, Started college a year before you and hasn't graduated yet, but you've already started your master's. I heard you're planning to graduate this year. I'm a good student, Locke smiled. To be honest, he wasn't very focused on his master's degree, having spent most of the 6 months away from school. If it weren't for the donation from his charitable foundation to the school, Dr. Gate wouldn't have been able to pass Locke's classes so easily given his attendance rate. If this were true, Locke's progress would be similar to that of young Sheldon. Peggy's earlier joke that Locke would join young Sheldon in calling her Dr. Swanson might even come true. Why haven't I seen Joey and Rachel? Locke changed the subject. Why are you so concerned about Rachel? Don't forget she's done with you and is now Ross's girlfriend. Monica looked at Locke with some caution. Locke hadn't changed his ways. Even though Rachel initially claimed she was just looking for excitement, it was inevitable that she would fall in love with him over time. However, Locke reiterated that they wouldn't get married. After a long struggle, Rachel finally decided to break up, saying she needed to calm down. Locke didn't initiate a comeback, but Ross, who had been waiting for an opportunity, took advantage of Rachel's sadness and finally took the initiative to confess his love. The two finally got together. Monica was delighted to see her brother get what he wanted, but she also became wary of Locke, fearing he might still have feelings for Rachel. She knew that if Locke made the slightest advance, Rachel would be unstoppable. Oh my God, I was just asking, Locke said, raising his hands in surrender. Ding, the cafe door opened again, and Rachel and Ross entered. Seeing Locke, Rachel rushed over in delight, grabbing his hands and excitedly saying, "You're finally back, what's wrong?" Locke sensed something was off about Rachel's reaction. "Can you do me a favor?" Rachel asked, pleading. Of course, Locke nodded. Rachel then remembered that Locke didn't know the details, and the words on her lips suddenly shifted to, "Can you be my boyfriend?" Huh? Locke looked at Rachel in surprise, then at Ross beside him, unsure how to react. "Aren't you and Ross in a relationship now?" Locke said after a moment, surprised. "Ross has agreed." Rachel's next words surprised Locke even more. Was it just as I thought? Had he stepped into some kind of special edition of Friends? Just pretending to be my boyfriend. Rachel's next words finally helped Locke regain his composure. He thought to himself, "It's not my fault for misunderstanding. It's really because you guys showed up so suddenly that I didn't understand what was going on. What happened that made me pretend to be your boyfriend?" As he asked this, Locke felt a little disappointed. He secretly cursed this decadent and corrupted world of American TV dramas for corrupting even a once pure boy like me. "Barry and Mindy are getting married," Rachel explained. "They asked me to be their maid of honor, and I agreed, so that's what it is," Locke said, recalling the past plot. "How could you have agreed to that? I remember Barry slandering you all the time, saying you were obsessed with beauty. They probably had no good intentions when they invited you to their wedding. I can't really explain it," Rachel said with regret. "Mindy said a few nice things, and I couldn't control myself and agreed. But now, thinking about all the ridicule I'll receive at the wedding, I want to kill myself back then I'll just not go." Locke felt that the best option was to avoid such an awkward situation. Besides, the circumstances in the plot were definitely orchestrated by Barry and Mindy. Both parties were at fault, but Barry and Mindy were actually more at fault. After Rachel and Barry got engaged, he cheated on Mindy. Rachel's escape was a blessing in disguise. Plus, Rachel had just run away from her marriage, and Barry seamlessly dragged Mindy on a honeymoon, hurling insults at her. Given Rachel's personality, it was hard to imagine she'd even be willing to attend their wedding. "But Mindy's different," Rachel said, hesitating. "She used to be my best friend, but she's not anymore. But I still want to be friends with her." He glanced at Rachel, remembering what she'd said when they played games together, and gave Ross a strange look. It seemed like Mindy was indeed different from Rachel. Many of Rachel's techniques were taught to her by Mindy, including kissing. Chapter 169 The Chief Best Man is a little panic. "Whatever you think, I don't think this is a good idea," Locke thought for a moment before offering his advice. "Whatever your past entanglements were, we're no longer in touch, and we might not even see each other once a year. Why bother losing face over this? I've thought about everything you said," Rachel said. "That's why I asked you to pretend to be my boyfriend." Rachel had considered this before. She knew about Barry's slander earlier than the plot showed. Now that she had agreed to Mindy's request, she decided to find someone who could completely outdo Barry. While Ross had a doctorate, Barry also had a doctorate in dentistry. And when it came to income, Ross would be outshone by Barry. So she thought of Locke. His looks and figure were simply stunning, and he was also a billionaire. Just showing him off would bring her immense happiness, letting the Bixie couple know she deserved better. Thinking of this, Rachel looked at Locke, memories of the past surfacing, and a hint of tears welled in her eyes. If you've already discussed this with Ross, I don't mind. Locke glanced at Ross, seeing him fuming but holding back. He knew this jealous guy had probably argued with Rachel before, and now he was clearly losing the fight. Then it's settled. I'll get ready. Rachel immediately stood up and said to Locke with confidence, "Come shopping with me now." 2 nights later, Locke, dressed up, went to pick up Rachel for the wedding of her ex-fiancée and her former best friend, only to find Ross with a sour look on his face. "Are you okay with this?" Locke asked with a smile. "Of course I am." Ross couldn't help but complain. "You know, I'm Rachel's boyfriend. You can talk to Rachel about it." Ross's expression froze. He didn't dare say anything more, or Rachel would probably break up with him. He had finally made Rachel his girlfriend, and it had only been a little over a month. He couldn't bear to part ways. "How is it going?" Rachel asked, emerging from the room wearing the red bridesmaid dress Mindy had sent her. "So beautiful." Ross's expression was exaggerated. "Wow, you're the most beautiful bridesmaid." "Mindy's almost outshined by you," everyone echoed. Americans thought red bridesmaid dresses were hideous, though they were just being polite. But Locke genuinely thought they were beautiful. Locke's aesthetic wasn't entirely in sync with Americans. It was as if he could hear Chandler's low grumble, "We don't have sheep here, because that's what shepherdesses wear." Everyone packed up. "Let's go." Locke looked at Monica and Richard. Richard had also been invited to the wedding, and Monica was accompanying him as his bridesmaid. "No problem," Monica smiled, taking Richard's hand. As someone who loved older men, she was truly pleased with Richard as a boyfriend. "Then let's go." The 4 of them went downstairs, and Locke drove all the way to the church where the wedding was to take place. At the altar, Barry and Mindy, the newlyweds, stood together, accepting the blessings of the crowd. Rachel was already filled with regret. Thinking of the constant stares from the audience, and the vicious rumors spread by Barry's family that she'd run away from the wedding because she'd been poisoned by beauty, made her feel even more mad. She'd initially prepared for the worst, but when she faced it, she realized the situation was far more serious than she'd imagined. Yet, she had to maintain a smile, even if it was already stiff. "I've always fantasized about my own wedding. No one's joys and sorrows are shared." Monica, looking at the wedding with envy, said, "Rachel's already stood at the altar twice, even as a bridesmaid this time, and I haven't even once. It reminds me of my mom's sarcasm. At least Rachel had a chance to keep the groom at the altar, but I didn't even get that chance." "You'll have it," Richard said helplessly. "That's why I love attending weddings," a man in a fancy suit said nearby. Locke glanced at him, slightly taken aback. "Oh my God, isn't this Barney, the playboy from How I Met Your Mother?" Locke had once considered trying to find the characters from this sitcom, but after experiencing Friends and realizing that the quests were far fewer than with Sheldon, his interest faded. He hadn't expected to run into him here this time. Monica was simply overwhelmed by the wedding. Richard understood her words, but the mature man, fresh out of decades of marriage, didn't necessarily share the same sentiments and could only cope. Monica's reaction perfectly matched Barney's theory. Barney chatted with Locke for a few moments before suddenly saying, "Hey, buddy, which bridesmaid do you think is prettiest?" "The one at the back is my girlfriend." Locke had agreed, so he naturally had to fulfill his obligations. "Wow," Barney exclaimed in surprise. "Does she have a grudge against the bride? Or did she think she was too pretty and deliberately gave her such an ugly bridesmaid dress?" "You have good taste, bro," Locke said with a smile. "But you'd better not set your sights on her." "Don't worry, I know the rules, bro," Barney said, patting Locke's shoulder with a familiar touch. Locke smiled and said nothing. Those who understood the rules Barney was talking about knew what they were talking about. After the ceremony at the church ended, everyone went to the hotel for the wedding banquet. Locke quickly noticed Rachel's situation and quickly stepped behind her to block it. "Rachel, be careful." "What's wrong?" Rachel, whose mood was fluctuating at the moment, was a little distracted. "Don't you feel a little cold behind you?" Locke reminded her. "What?" Rachel was stunned for a moment, subconsciously reached out to touch it, and then immediately shuddered and quickly adjusted her dress. "Oh my God, Locke, I can't stand it anymore. Let's leave this place." "If you leave now, It means you have a completely admitted defeat, and you will definitely be ridiculed by them for the rest of your life, Locke said in a deep voice, but since they treated my female companion like this, I will definitely make them regret it later. Really? Rachel's expression brightened and looked at Locke. Of course, you just realized Barry was a scumbag in time, so you dumped him. Mindy, knowing Barry's true nature, still chose to marry him. That was Mindy's own mistake. I'll show everyone that you're the smart and kind girl. Thank you, Locke. Rachel, feeling reassured by Locke's encouragement, felt a sense of security. The embarrassment on her face faded, and she followed Locke to the banquet. As expected, just like in the storyline, someone popped up moments later. Barry's best man tapped his glass, attracting everyone's attention, and began to read his congratulatory speech. I still remember the scene after Barry's first date with Rachel. The entire place fell silent. Most of the people were coaching Rachel, and now everyone looked at her, making her even more embarrassed. What's wrong? The best man continued. The band hasn't changed, so I can't use the same toast as last time. As if by agreement, the band made a noise, seemingly echoing the best man's words. I wish you a long and happy life together, and Rachel, the best man said solemnly, not many people would have the courage to come back here tonight, let alone seeing the best man about to say something that would further embarrass Rachel. As planned, Locke confirmed his suspicions from watching the show. Someone must have been behind the incident, causing Rachel's dress to reveal her flesh. Ahem. At this point, Locke suddenly interrupted the best man. Since the other party had ill intentions, he didn't care about courtesy. It's true that few women have Rachel's courage. And in fact, her choice was not wrong, was it? It just happened to help these two newlyweds get together. At this, Locke glanced at Barry and Mindy, whose faces were beginning to stiffen, and smiled. It does take a lot of courage to come here and bless them again. After all, not every groom can seamlessly take the chief bridesmaid on their honeymoon. The moment their bride runs away from the wedding, everyone turned to Barry and Mindy. They all understood the meaning of Locke's words and thought they understood why Rachel ran away from her wedding in the first place. Barry's previous slanderous rumors against Rachel were now completely shattered. Everyone looked at the newlyweds with strange eyes, their expressions now comparable to Rachel's. Of course the best man should understand all this, which is why he said that. By the way, is your girlfriend among the bridesmaids? Locke's malicious words made the best man's face darken. He glanced suspiciously at his girlfriend, who was wearing a bridesmaid dress, and then at Barry. Some things were fine if you didn't think about them normally, but when he thought of Locke's words, the best man panicked, and thoughts started to grow in his mind. Barry had a criminal record. If he could do this with Mindy, why couldn't he do this with his girlfriend? After all, his girlfriend often told him that she envied Mindy's good luck, saying that Barry had a good income and that Mindy had married a rich man. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Barney's Waterloo. Thank you. Watching the guests whisper among themselves, occasionally glancing gossipily at Barry and Mindy, Rachel knew she had won, and whispered a thank you into Locke's ear. Why should you be so polite? We know each other well, Locke smiled. But you should stay away from them from now on, including Mindy. Their ill intentions were obvious today. I understand. Rachel came to her senses, remembering the bridesmaids suddenly surrounding her and making awkward conversation. Perhaps that was when the dress had gone wrong. No one had warned her during the long journey, but Locke had seen it all. And then there was the best man's malicious words. If Locke hadn't interrupted, he would have probably mentioned the embarrassing incident. All of this made Rachel realize that Mindy was absolutely aware of everything, and even had some malicious involvement. In that light, she likely had invited her with ill intentions. And then there was Mindy's flirting with Barry, acting as his best friend. All these memories resurfaced, revealing to her that Mindy was undoubtedly a wicked friend. Hey, bro, that was a pretty explosive comment. Just then, Barney leaned over and said to Locke, I didn't realize your girlfriend and the bride and groom had such a fascinating past. That's all in the past. Locke smiled, suddenly thinking of Barney's record and an idea forming in his mind. By the way, Barney, have you found a suitable target? Locke asked. I've got a few potential targets. I'll be ready to take them down soon after I say hello to you, Barney said. pointing. Do you have any thoughts on a different target? Locke smiled, indicating Barry and Mindy's location. Wow. Bro, I was right. You're a very understanding person, Barney said with a smile. This is a big challenge. Do you want me to leave you some clues for the groom? If you succeed, I'll buy you drinks tomorrow night and be your wingman, Locke said with a smile. That's a deal. Barney, love a good challenge, he agreed immediately and walked towards the bride and groom with a smile. After Barney left, Rachel finally realized what was going on. Wait a minute, Locke, he's going to ask for, just wait and see, Locke said with a smile. I believe this wedding will be a beautiful memory they'll never forget, but Rachel's face was a little troubled, yet somehow, she felt a small sense of anticipation. Okay, let's ignore them for now. I think something's wrong with Monica, Locke suddenly pointed in her direction. Huh? Rachel looked in Locke's direction. Monica seems to be crying? Let's go check. Seeing them like this, Locke guessed what was going on. It was probably something to do with the marriage. Monica desperately wanted to get married, but Richard, tired of decades of marriage, preferred to simply enjoy the feeling of love. It was a matter of principle. After Richard's explanation, Monica understood that he wasn't joking, but the truth. She couldn't accept a relationship without a future. All the way back, both of them looked glum, and Locke and Rachel tactfully avoided asking. The next morning, Locke got a call from Barney. Hey, bro, do you remember me? I completed the challenge yesterday, how could I forget? Locke said with a smile. I just didn't expect you to pull it off. Well, would you like to hear the details? We agreed to treat you tonight. Sure, Locke agreed. You can pick any bar in New York. As long as you can handle the drinks. I'll cover everything. Locke had to hear about something so interesting. He could gossip with his old friends at Central Perk Cafe later. It was quite a treat. Hey, men, this place is nice, isn't it? Barney swayed effortlessly to the vibrant music as they entered the bar. He watched the beautiful women dancing on the dance floor, his eyes darting around, searching for a worthy target. The atmosphere is really good, Locke nodded. He and Barney went to the bar, ordered a drink, and sipped it slowly, commenting on the women around them with Barney. Excuse me, could you please be my boyfriend for a moment? Just then, a beautiful blonde approached Barney and said. Wow, of course. It's my pleasure. Barney glanced at the girl and agreed with a smile. He said to the bartender, bring this beautiful woman a martini. It'll be on my tab. Don't you mind? Barney gestured to Locke, indicating that he would get a point first. Of course not, Locke nodded with a smile. How could he not recognize Harley Quinn? He had no idea why she was there. Thank you, the woman said to Barney with a smile. I'll leave once that man who's been bothering me stops paying attention to me. Don't worry, you're welcome. Barney smiled, raised his glass, and began chatting with the blonde beauty. The two chatted for a while, and Barney felt that he had a good chat with a girl named Jessie. He appropriately mentioned his position at Giant Bank. Jessie's behavior was very consistent with the American girl's expectations. She was handsome and a bank executive. It was obvious that she should seize the opportunity. Feeling almost done, Barney tentatively asked, can I take you home? Actually, I'm a stage actor. I'm in Los Angeles auditioning for a musical, and I'm staying at a hotel not far away, Jessie said, a smile on her face. Barney glanced over his shoulder. Rock was already dancing with another girl on the dance floor. He ignored the previous agreement and took out his credit card to pay. He put his arm around Jessie's waist and left the bar, heading to his hotel room. As the door opened, Barney was just thinking about saying something to liven things up when Jessie aggressively pushed him against the wall. She held Barney's head and kissed him, even aggressively ripping open his suit and shirt. Barney had rarely seen such a proactive and passionate girl, and he felt a surge of excitement. How could he afford to back down? He immediately responded. A few minutes later, Barney lay in bed, watching Jessie straddle him. Just as he was about to unfasten the headlights, the door slammed open. Jessie was startled and hurriedly got up from the bed. He turned around and shouted, "Oh my God, Roy, didn't you say you had something to do tonight?" Then Jessie shouted to Barney, "Go away, he is my boyfriend." Barney has done a lot of things like stealing girls. He was originally calm, but when he saw the strong man with an angry face and a gun in his hand, he immediately became scared. Chapter 171 Help. Faced with a gun-wielding, furious man, Barney abandoned all else and, clutching his pants, rushed out of the hotel. He spotted Locke strolling down the street with a girl in his arms. "Hey, buddy, "What's wrong with you?" Seeing Barney, barefoot and in his underwear, finally putting his pants back on, Locke teased, "Where's that chick you left with? Damn. I didn't expect that woman to have a boyfriend, and he's got a gun." Barney couldn't help but curse. "I have to get back." He found his car keys hanging from his pants, opened the door of a nearby car, and realized his wallet was missing. "Oh my god, my wallet was in the hotel room." "Hey, what happened? Tell me," Locke said, smiling at the flustered Barney. "Let's get in the car. It's freezing." Barney had left his suit and shirt at the hotel, and was still shirtless, feeling the cold. "Okay," Locke said to Amy Adams, smiling, and they opened the car door and got in. Barney, shirtless, turned on the heater, recounted the incident to Locke. Then Locke said, "Hey, men, were you set on a honey trap?" "What?" Barney, having calmed down, suddenly understood. He'd heard of such stories before, but facing the armed man, he had no other choice but to run. Recalling the details, Barney's suspicions grew, and his anger intensified. He'd been a playboy in New York for so many years, and this was the first time he'd suffered such a heavy loss. Then Barney saw Jesse and the man fleeing separately from the hotel, further confirming Locke's words. He pulled his phone from his pocket, made a few calls, and started to follow. "If I were you, I wouldn't do that," Locke said. "I've got someone who's going to teach that chick a lesson." "I've never suffered such a heavy loss at the hands of a woman before," Barney declared. "I warned you, I have things to do," Locke said, motioning to the beautiful woman sitting in the back. "Whatever you want," Barney said, watching Locke and the girl get out of the car and start the car. Just as Locke had put the beautiful woman to sleep, he received a call from Barney. "Hey, buddy, can you do me a favor? Looks like you just got screwed again," Locke said with a predictable tone. Seeing Harley Quinn's face and considering Barney's experience, Locke knew Barney was going to get screwed. After all, Jesse wasn't just one or two people working alone, there was a con artist and his team behind them. Barney then recounted his experience. After Locke and Amy Locke left, Barney ran about 600 to 700 meters after Jesse, then saw him approach a trash can and casually pull out a men's wallet and throw it in. Not far from the trash can was an ATM. Barney immediately recognized his wallet and saw another ATM next to it. Jesse had just walked to the coffee shop, waiting in line for coffee. Shirtless Barney, feeling a little cold, quickly ran to the trash can and found his wallet. While watching Jesse through the coffee shop's floor-to-ceiling windows, Barney took out his wallet and card and went to the ATM to withdraw $10,000, planning to buy some clothes later. Unbeknownst to him, after he continued driving after Jesse, a fat man leisurely approached the ATM and used a fluorescent flashlight to reveal the numbers Barney had just entered. He then fiddled with a plastic cover that matched the ATM's, went to a nearby van, and retrieved a miniature camera hidden inside. He then obtained Barney's bank card PIN. As for Barney's bank card, while Barney still had it, it was clear who would get it. He followed Jessie for about half an hour until she entered a clothing store. He quickly took the opportunity to run to a nearby men's clothing store and buy a suit. He then called a friend, gave him the address, and followed Jessie into a nearby nightclub. A while later, Barney's friends arrived, and Barney entered the nightclub with them. With only 3 men and 2 women, he figured he didn't need to worry about a female scammer, so he went in. But after searching the crowded nightclub for 10 minutes, he couldn't find Jessie. Then, by chance, he turned and saw her standing at the club entrance, waving at him, keys dangling from her hand. "Fuck you," Barney couldn't help but curse. "That damn bitch not only set me up, but she also stole my car keys and wallet again. When I chased her outside, she disappeared in my car. Even my friend's wallet was gone. When I got home, my bank called and said a full $200,000 had been charged to my credit cards overnight. Damn it. I've never suffered such a huge loss, Barney. You must help me find this woman who's been so badly tricking me so many times." At this, Barney couldn't help but feel the pain. What had originally been a few $1,000s in losses had now escalated to over $200,000. Even for his wealth, it was too much. Fortunately, although several friends' wallets were lost, the credit cards inside didn't have pins, so they wouldn't be stolen like his own. All they had to do was change their pins the next day, and the most they'd lose was a small amount of cash. Barney's friends then urged him to call the police, but Barney, always concerned about his reputation, refused, instead asking them not to. He knew the police had little hope of catching the scammers, so after some consideration, He decided to call Locke, a recent acquaintance, for help. As a senior executive at a New York bank, Barney was aware of Locke's identity and knew that powerful figures like him had their own connections and influence. Asking Locke for help might be more reliable than calling the police. "Okay, I'll have someone help investigate," Locke said after a moment's thought. "But if this group leaves New York after their success, even I'll have trouble tracking them down." With that, Locke became interested in Jesse's gang. He'd seen the Will Smith film Focus before him, and he knew how effective such skilled con artists could be in certain situations. Thinking of this, after hanging up the phone with Barney, Locke called Damon. Locke went to sleep after finishing his instructions, but for Jesse and her accomplices, the rest of the night was a terrifying experience for them, facing Damon and others who came to them with guns. Chapter 172: The Idea of Subprime Mortgage. The next morning, Locke arrived at the farm and greeted Damon. "Have you found everyone?" "Of course," Damon nodded. 32 in total, all apprehended. "That's a lot of people," Locke smiled. The scammers Jesse had joined were a complete chain. This was also shown in the movie. At least 7 or 8 people gathered in a secret base to sort through the stolen goods and cash, not counting those who actually cooperated with the operation. Damon detailed the results of the overnight interrogation to Locke. Jesse had been randomly searching for targets in the bar, and Barney, dressed in a high-end custom suit, naturally caught his eye, leading to the subsequent chain of events. If it had just been cash, watches, and credit cards, Damon would have had a difficult time tracking them down. He was only able to apprehend the suspects thanks to Barney's lost sports car. Damon tracked down a local car trafficking ring, zeroing in on a few key members, and then located their base and busted them all. That Jesse has been roaming the streets of New York since he was a teenager. He easily spotted Mr. Barney's clumsy tracking, and then, Damon shrugged. These guys were indeed veterans. After discovering Barney, they quickly came up with a plan to deal with him. "All right, bring these guys to me," Locke said to Damon. "They might be shady, but you never know, they might be useful." Damon nodded. Since Locke had recently asked him to transfer the men he'd received from Mexico to a mysterious individual, he guessed that Locke would probably no longer assign him to anti-gang duties. This meant he would completely transition into a security company manager. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing. After all, no one would choose to engage in shady activities when they could pursue an honest path. In the farmhouse's living room, Locke met the core members of the gang. Jesse and Nick were familiar faces, as well as the scraggly-haired, portly Fald, a credit card expert. Since his looks didn't allow him to be a leading figure, he could only rely on his abilities to make a living. "I think one night is enough for you to get to know me," Locke said to the 3 men with a smile. "Yes, Mr. Locke Lee, the most sought-after billionaire in New York right now. Although you've always kept a low profile, I've heard quite a few rumors about you on occasion," Nick said. "So, how do you think someone like me would deal with the guy who ripped off my friend?" Locke gave Damon a look, and Damon understood, pulling out his gun, snapping the safety, and pointing it at the back of Nick's head. "Sir, please give me 5 minutes, Nick said quickly. "I have an idea. If you're not satisfied, I'm willing to take them to apologize to your friend." "No problem, I'm not in a hurry," Locke said leisurely, looking at Nick. Nick hesitated, then looked at Jesse and Falder. "Sorry, what I'm about to say touches on a brother's secret, so please give me a moment of privacy." Jesse and Falder didn't react much. After all, while they were part of a team, con men didn't have a true life-or-death relationship. After that, Nick looked at Locke. "Okay, Damon, take your 2 friends on a tour of the estate," Locke said. "Okay," Damon nodded, and took Jesse and Falder away. "So, what exactly did you want to talk about?" After the 2 men left the reception room, Locke poured 2 cups of tea from the teapot, pushing one to Nick, and asked. "Thank you." Nick felt more confident. It seemed that although Locke was from Texas, he clearly didn't have the discriminatory habits of those in Texas. "Sir, I wonder if you've heard of Gary Bernard and Joel?" Nick asked. "Of course I have. They did something big in Texas over 20 years ago," Locke said. "Do you have any connection to them?" The 2 people Nick mentioned reminded Locke of a movie he had seen before called The Banker, in which Gary Bernard was the protagonist. He was a black man from Texas who, with his savings, partnered with another black man, Joel, in California and made a fortune in real estate. Then, after a visit to his family in Texas, he came up with the idea of helping his fellow black people. He arranged for a white representative to acquire a bank and provide loans to his fellow black people, allowing them to buy homes in good neighborhoods. Initially, things went smoothly, but then problems arose. The white representative, eager to pursue his own career and not be a puppet, encouraged two individuals to acquire a second bank he controlled. However, the white representative ultimately botched the deal. The bank's loan book became tainted, prompting federal investigations and the revelation that the two black men had taken over the bank. At the time, such a move was unacceptable under the unspoken law, especially in the conservative state of Texas. The incident caused a significant backlash, and because of the bank's accounting issues, both Gary and Joel were imprisoned for 3 years and their assets confiscated. "Are you related to them?" Locke asked, surprised by Nick's connection to them. The film focused didn't reveal Nick's specific origins. "To be precise, it has something to do with their son Garrett," Nick said. "After what happened back then, Mr. Bernard and Mr. Joel left the United States. But 10 years ago, having made their fortune, they returned here, to New York. That's when I got to know Mr. Bernard's son, Garrett, who's been very helpful to me. Now, Garrett wants to expand into real estate, but funding constraints have prevented him from doing so. His idea is this." After listening to Nick's story, Locke thought to himself, "Isn't this subprime lending? It's nothing new now, the stuff that caused the subprime mortgage crisis over a decade later, but if you really think about it, it does have great potential for making money. Using banks to issue loans, they can then package the subprime contracts and sell them to Wall Street, with a 30% prime loan and a 70% subprime loan. This way, banks not only earn interest on loans from high-quality customers, but also attract a large number of borrowers with poor credit and low incomes. They can even quickly recover the money lent from Wall Street, earning a commission along the way. This, like many financial games, is essentially a game of pass the parcel. As long as you're not the last one to take the plunge, you won't lose anything." However, Locke doesn't think this is the right thing to do. It's too tedious, and if things go south, it could cause trouble. The ambitious young man Nick introduced might be the perfect candidate. The subprime mortgage crisis wasn't just due to excessive spending, but also because housing prices had stagnated. With careful attention and early warning of the danger, exiting shouldn't be a problem. Whether this young man can resist the temptation and follow suit is uncertain. Too many brilliant minds have failed in the face of greed. "Your friend is a very ambitious man, just like his father," Locke said after a moment's thought. "He wants to work for me, to be more precise, he's been looking for a partner," Nick said cautiously. "I'll arrange for someone to discuss the cooperation with him. Now, let's discuss your issues," Locke said slowly. "I have some cash. Choose a few trustworthy people from your team and, according to my instructions, take this money and go on a tour. If you perform well, this matter will be forgiven, and there will be a bonus, but you will not be able to touch your current business anymore." The money Locke was referring to was the cash from the Cordes family. Because he had been preoccupied with the British pound crisis, Locke had only laundered a portion of the money and gold, using the majority to pay Damon and his group. He had $100 million remaining in cash, which Locke planned to invest in the East Country, initially purchasing some fixed assets. As for Nick and his group, Locke contacted Kataria. With her watching over them, he had no fear of Nick and his group's ulterior motives. It wasn't that Locke looked down on Nick and his group. Con men were not desperados after all, and Kataria was more than capable of handling them. Nick realized Locke intended for him to work with him, and he agreed without hesitation. For people like them, having a backer means that even if they get into trouble and go to jail, they can get their sentence reduced to the greatest extent possible. This is a good thing that many of their peers would like to have. And at this point, he had no choice but to agree. Chapter 173 Mana, the Acting One. Locke recovered Barney's stolen money and car, but he still harbored some resentment towards Jesse. Barney couldn't possibly have done anything to Jesse, but Locke claimed to have let them go long ago. After dealing with Nick, Locke spent a few days on a romantic vacation with Amy, Superman's ex-girlfriend, whom he had flirted with that night. He put her on a flight back to Los Angeles, where she would return to school in Fairview. Locke and Myrna Ipez had been infrequent since their last meeting, partly due to busy schedules and a desire to avoid getting in trouble. Honestly, during Christmas in England, Locke missed her last Christmas outfit, a red cotton miniskirt with white trim, paired with fishnet stockings and high heels. It was a shame Deborah Yahweh was back in Texas for Christmas, otherwise he would have definitely made her try it. Before leaving for England, the latest news he heard was that Mr. Ipez had caught his wife and Annie in bed together at a hotel. After hearing about this incident, Locke felt that this woman was indeed a master of her craft. Knowing that Mr. Ipez was suspicious of her, he simply revealed an adulterer. When Locke returned, he found Mona Ipez still living peacefully at home. It was only 5 days later, one afternoon in a hotel room, that Locke learned from her that Mr. Ipez had actually modified the prenuptial agreement in an effort to salvage their relationship. Mona Ipez acted rather smug, and Locke lamented that this woman was truly a skilled actor, and that Mr. Ipez was likely doomed. A few days later, while passing by, Locke noticed something fishy going on between Mona Ipez and their new gardener, which convinced Locke to sever the relationship once and for all. Locke also knew the new gardener, Owen Shaw, who appeared to be a high school student at the town school. His youthful appearance reminded Locke of the villain from Fast and Furious 6. Besides, there was the gynecologist with a poor appetite he'd met at the birthday party, still looking for opportunities. Locke just hoped he wouldn't provoke the future villain. "Locke, are you free Friday night?" Just after asking Locke a question that day, Julie said to him, "Zach's back." "Zach, yes, and I heard he inherited hundreds of millions of dollars from his grandfather," Julie said. "He's back to see Mike and is planning a party to thank the neighbors for taking care of him since he was a child. He'd like to invite you, as well as Peggy and Ashley." "I'm free, and I'll go with Peggy," Locke nodded. Locke hadn't seen Zach's wealthy grandfather since that one encounter, and he'd surprisingly passed away. It was a rather unfortunate story for the wealthy man. He'd worked so hard to build a successful business, but one of his 2 daughters was murdered, and the other had no interest in continuing his legacy. Fortunately, he suddenly discovered that he had a grandson, but when he found him, he was already terminally ill and passed away within 2 years. "I just don't know if Zach is now able to take care of the wealth in his hands. Will he squander it recklessly and end up being ripped off by others like in the original plot?" With this thought in mind, Locke glanced at Julie again and found that she seemed to be hesitant to speak, so he asked, "Is there anything else?" Actually, there is one more thing I want to ask you for help with." Julie hesitated and said, "I'm applying to college soon. So I'd like you to write a few letters of recommendation for me. Among the people I know, you are the most reputable and the most influential." "Of course, no problem. You don't have to be polite with me about such a small matter," Locke said with a smile. "Have you decided which university you want to apply to?" "Based on my situation, I plan to apply to several universities. Among them, Harvard and Princeton University. With my set scores, the chances of success are not high. There are too many people with higher scores than me. As for Columbia University, I plan to give my all." "It's okay, Julie. Actually, if you really want to go to Harvard or Princeton, I do have some ways." "No need, Locke. You've already helped me a lot. I don't want to owe you too much," Julie said, looking into Locke's eyes. "There's no need to talk about debts." Locke came to Julie's side, grasped her hand, and leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Why don't you come to Princeton? That way we can see each other more often." Feeling the warmth against her ear, Julie's heartbeat quickened and her face flushed. "But Locke, we can't do this. You already have Ashley. She won't mind," Locke said, kissing the girl's lips softly. The two embraced. When they parted again, Julie whispered, "Not in the living room, let's go to the bedroom." Locke carried her upstairs, suddenly feeling a strange sensation. 2 days later, Zach's party was held at Mike and Susan's house. Familiar neighbors were in attendance. Arriving in Susan's yard, they saw Tom and Lynette chatting with a woman and a girl. "Hi, Tom, Lynette," Locke greeted them. "Hi, Locke," Tom said with a smile. "Thank you so much for your help. My 2 sons are able to attend the best private school in town." "It's nothing, just a letter of recommendation," Locke smiled, then looked to the side. "Who are these?" Tom didn't know what to say, so Lynette said, "This is Nora, Tom's ex-girlfriend, and Kayla, Tom's daughter." Lynette's tone was a little helpless. Nora was a stripper Tom had known before she and Tom met. Their relationship was short-lived. Nora secretly gave birth to Kayla, and Tom never knew about it until she contacted him a while ago and confirmed Kayla's identity through a paternity test. Lynette was almost insane when she found out. What was even more unbearable was that Nora had moved in nearby with Kayla. Her woman's intuition told her that Nora had ulterior motives. But there were some things she couldn't tell Tom directly. When introducing Nora to Locke, she couldn't say that she was just a stripper who had a few one-night stands with Tom. I didn't know Tom had such a lovely daughter. Locke, who had watched the plot, naturally knew this as well. He felt that it was indeed not easy for Lynette, and said, I understand, Lynette, you are a good person. Maintaining a family is indeed a very hard thing. If you need any help, just let me know. Thank you, Locke, you have helped us a lot. Lynette smiled and said, thank you for introducing the job to Tom. He likes it very much? Yes, that's right. Tom nodded beside him. It's great there. It's nothing. Tom has the ability. I just pulled a string. Locke smiled and nodded, and when he saw Zach coming over, he went to meet him. Chapter 174 The Black Witch Queen's Letter. You look more energetic than before, Locke said, greeting Zach. I've learned a lot in the past 2 years, Zach shrugged. Grandpa taught me a lot, and it's made me see the world from a new perspective, a completely different perspective than before. That shows you've truly learned something, Locke said with a smile. How does it feel to suddenly become rich? You probably have some experience with that, Zach said with a smile. I asked you to come here specifically to discuss something with you. What is it? Grandpa left me an inheritance, including the company and a small amount of real estate, and also a sum of money. I'd like to invest it in a Sky Fund project, but a 6% fixed return isn't enough for me. How about 10%? Wow, Zach, you're asking for too much? Locke shook his head. You know I can't guarantee such a high return while also protecting my principal. I have a 0.7% stake in Time Warner. If you agree, I'll sell it to you at the market price, and you'll keep the money in your fund, Zach stated. Even so, a 10% return is still too high. I estimate that I will lose money to you every year. How about 6.5%? Your investment direction is no secret. Even if the shares of Time Warner Group are relatively dispersed, it is not easy for you to acquire enough shares. After all, Time Warner Group is an excellent investment target for everyone. Holding these shares will get dividends every year. If there is not enough income, I will not let it go. It is better to be direct. 8% is my final offer. Okay, let's do as you say, Locke nodded after considering it, but this rate of return requires the signing of a confidentiality agreement. No problem, I will arrange for my lawyer to contact your people, Zach said with a smile. It seems that doing business is not that difficult. You have already started to get started. Locke smiled and clinked glasses with him. Having finalized the deal with Zach, Locke felt his efforts in getting the wealthy man to find his grandson were worthwhile. He approached Ashley at the buffet table and asked, "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to make the pawn shop number 8 you made the other day," Ashley said. "But I can't get it as colorful as you did. It takes a little bit of skill and reflexes," Locke said with a smile. He took the cocktail shaker from Ashley and began to tinker with it. "Wow, I didn't expect you could do that," Julie said, joining in, admiring Locke's fancy cocktail mixing moves. "I know a lot more, and I'll teach you little by little." Locke smiled and offered a pun. "Want a drink?" "Of course," Julie said, holding out her glass. Locke poured a glass for her and Ashley. Julie first took in the vibrant color, then took a sip. She said with some surprise, "It's delicious. I've never tasted anything this good." "What's the name of this wine?" "Pawn shop number 8, Ashley said with a smile. "That's the name Locke gave it. Legend has it that it's a pawn shop established by the devil in another dimension, where only souls with strong desires and greed have the opportunity to trade. In this pawn shop, the devil lures the greedy into trading with him. They take anything: lifespan, health, love, even divine souls. People can trade these things for wealth and power, but once they make a deal with the pawn shop, even the smallest one, their souls are gradually infected by darkness, becoming more greedy and craving more. Those who make a deal think they've profited, but in reality, they've fallen prey to the devil's trick. The more they desire, the more they trade, until their entire soul is harvested by the devil. Pawn shop number 8 is always pawning, never redeeming. It's like Locke's cocktail. Once you drink it, you can never get rid of it. So you're the devil." Julie smiled at Locke. "Then do you want to keep drinking?" Locke smiled at Julie. "Of course." Julie smiled at the vibrant, alluring color of the wine glass and took another sip. "I've long been caught in the devil's trap and can't stop. So you'll have to keep mixing it for me from now on." "Of course, as long as you're willing." Locke smiled and raised his glass. After the party, Locke felt he'd rested enough and opened the system again. Since he hadn't found a new mission world yet, he simply entered the fairy tale world again. This time, Locke appeared in the same woods where the three crows had been. As he emerged from the woods and prepared to leave, he was stopped by a guard. "Lord Locke, Prince Jim is looking for you and would like you to meet him," the guard said. Locke had lived in the woods for 6 months since he and Jim separated, meaning they hadn't seen each other for 6 months. Locke didn't know why he was looking for him, so since the distance wasn't far, he followed the guard to the kingdom. Jim was overjoyed to see Locke again. He ordered the chef to prepare a sumptuous dinner. After dinner, he handed Locke a letter. This letter was sent by the Black Witch Queen along with a letter appointing me a noble, but you had already disappeared. I sent people searching for you for 3 months, and finally I found you. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have explained to the Black Witch Queen. Jim spoke with a touch of fear. The Queen's reputation for malevolence had spread across many countries, thanks to the Vatican's propaganda. Many knew she was a black magician, and Jim feared retaliation if he angered her. Locke smiled. Because the Queen was so charming in private, he couldn't yet connect her with the rumored malevolent Black Witch Queen. Good and evil are always determined by one's stance. In fact, Locke had earned the title of Nightmare Knight because he had inflicted a heavy loss on the Vatican's army on the battlefield. It was clear that the Vatican had a propaganda advantage. After all, so many countries in the fairy tale world believed in the Vatican. After receiving the letter from Jim, Locke returned to the room Jim had assigned him and opened it. It contained seemingly ordinary greetings, but as Locke cast a spell, the contents suddenly changed. A werewolf family. After carefully examining the letter, Locke pondered. The Queen's letter instructed him to travel to a country controlled by the Vatican, seek out the leader of the werewolf family, and bring him back to the Kingdom of Lawrence. Controlling the leader of the werewolf family would allow him to control a large number of werewolves, a crucial factor for the Queen, who was currently struggling to cope with the Vatican's numerous forces on her own. The Queen also offered him a reward, promising to teach him some potion-making techniques. Since it wasn't a free errand, Locke couldn't refuse. The next day, he packed his bags, said goodbye to Jim, and set off on his journey. Chapter 175 The Old Witch's Deception. Following the directions given by the Queen, Locke traveled eastward until he arrived in a new country. He stopped at a tavern in the city and listened to the chatter of the people there. The country had just ended a war, and many soldiers had been sent home. Locke had little interest in such things. He finished his drink and was about to continue on his way when the conversation between the tavern owner and someone caught Locke's attention. A few days ago, an old witch had come to the tavern, claiming to be able to predict people's futures. Many people tried it out and found it quite effective. As a result, many people now came to the tavern to seek divination, and the tavern owner, intentionally or unintentionally, promoted it, as his business was significantly better than before. This overheard conversation piqued Locke's interest. He also heard the owner say that the old witch would appear soon, so he decided to stay for a while to see who this fortune teller was. Sure enough, a few moments later, Locke saw the old witch enter the tavern. With a slight sense of her, Locke detected the presence of magic. Clearly, according to the fairy tale world, this was indeed an old witch, though not particularly powerful, far inferior to Locke's current strength, let alone the Queen's. Locke was still surprised by her flamboyant demeanor. While the kingdom wasn't completely controlled by the church, it still held considerable influence. Upon arriving, Locke had to change his attire and name slightly to avoid attracting the church's attention. But this old witch so readily displayed her divination abilities. Where did she get such audacity? Upon her arrival, she was surrounded by a crowd. Locke observed her from the outside. She wore a gray robe and a blue plaid apron. Her face was deeply wrinkled, suggesting she was quite old. She pulled out a crystal ball and began to read a fortune. Just then, the tavern door opened, and a man dressed as a soldier entered. "A glass of wheat beer," the soldier said as he stepped to the bar. The others in the tavern looked at the soldier with a wary look in their eyes. Many of the soldiers sent home from the battlefield were ruthless. Having seen blood on the battlefield and possessing weapons, there was no telling when they might commit murder or arson. Upon seeing the soldier, the old witch was momentarily stunned, then a hint of joy flashed in her eyes. She said to the soldier, "Soldier, I see in you extraordinary courage and a strong heart." Locke raised a brow and began to study the soldier. The old witch's words had a hint of excitement and impatience, which piqued Locke's curiosity. In Locke's eyes, the soldier was just an ordinary person, without any magical powers. "Thank you," the soldier nodded at the old witch's compliment, then curiously looked at the witch, surrounded by a group of people. "What are you doing, Hetty?" The old witch, noticing she had caught the soldier's attention, smiled with some delight. "It's just a little game. I'm just using divination to help people find the path of their destiny." "Divination?" The soldier looked at the old witch. "How interesting. If you're interested, I can tell you about your future." The old witch's words tinged with temptation. "Really?" The soldier, eager to try, approached the old witch. "Of course. Sit down." "What's your name, soldier?" the old witch asked, after inviting the soldier to sit. "Philip. My name is Philip," the soldier said. Soldier Philip, hearing this name, and looking back at the old witch, Locke thought of a fairy tale, the tinder box. "What do I do next?" the soldier asked, looking at the old witch. "It's simple. Just place your hand on this crystal ball," the old witch said with a chuckle. As soon as Soldier Philip placed his hand on it, the crystal ball lit up. He felt a moment of daze, but quickly recovered. "How is it going?" Soldier Philip asked. "Very good." The old witch's eyes lit up with ecstasy. She stared at Soldier Philip for a long moment, until he was a little nervous. Then she slowly said, "I saw in destiny that your future will be filled with untold wealth. If you follow my guidance, you will." The old witch spoke slowly. "You want me to give you the money I have on me, right?" Soldier Philip interrupted the old witch. "I've seen many scams like yours. I won't fall for it." After saying this, Soldier Philip ignored the stunned old witch and stood up to return to the bar to drink. The old witch paused for a moment, as if thinking. After a moment, she took the crystal ball and prepared to leave. "Don't leave. You haven't even read our fortune yet," the people in the tavern said. The old witch ignored them and left the tavern. Watching the old witch leave, Locke pondered, but didn't follow. Instead, he studied the soldier, Philip. He knew that if he kept his eyes on him, he'd surely see the old witch again. Honestly, Locke still couldn't see anything special about the soldier, Philip, but from the old witch's reaction, Locke knew that her choosing him in the fairy tale was no accident. After the old witch left, the others in the tavern lamented that the old witch hadn't read their fortunes, as she was still quite accurate these days. This made the soldier, Philip, hesitate a bit, but he didn't change his original plan. After finishing his drink, he left the tavern and continued on his way. He left the city and walked along the road. As dusk approached, the sky gradually darkened, but he paid it no mind. His life on the battlefield had taught him how to deal with danger. That was when a familiar figure appeared before him, the old witch he had met in the tavern not long ago. Upon seeing her, Soldier Philip said, "I'm just an ordinary soldier. I don't have any money, so don't try to trick me. If you think so, you misunderstand me," the old witch said. "Your sword is really good, and your backpack is really big. I can see that you're an excellent soldier. I can give you as much money as you like. Thank you for the compliment, but how could such a good thing happen?" Soldier Philip still didn't believe the old witch. "This is fate," the old witch said. "See that big tree next to you? It's hollow. If you climb to the top, you'll see a hole. Slide down and you can get inside. It's just an ordinary tree. How could there be a hole?" "I wouldn't do that," Soldier Philip shook his head. "Of course, that's not what you can tell from the outside," the old witch said. "It's protected by magic. Only by removing the magic can you see its true form. Inside, there's an untold amount of money waiting for you to take." Really, Soldier Philip was finally tempted. After years of fighting, he had gained a lot of skills, but not much wealth. The king had sent him away with a small reward. "Of course, I wouldn't lie to a brave soldier. This won't take you long. You'll soon have countless money," the old witch said in a bewitching tone. "But don't forget to tie the rope around your waist so I can pull you up. If you deceive me, I'll make you pay," Soldier Philip said, staring at the old witch. "Don't worry, I won't lie to you," the old witch said slowly, "but you must remember what I tell you, otherwise you will be attacked by the treasure's mechanism." Meanwhile, Locke watched from a distance as the old witch tricked the soldier into helping her retrieve the tinder box. He kept wondering why the old witch insisted on having Philip go to the tree hole. Could she go in herself? Could it be that only this soldier could enter? What was so special about him? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.